Okay, good evening, everybody, and thank you for coming. This is the May version of the Community Development Committee. We're going to introduce ourselves, go around the table, and we'll start with the supervisors and then go to the staff.
Sean Anderson, District 2.
Ryan Shirley, District 13.
Jerry Van Zomen, District 18.
Scott Counter, District 11.
I'm Dan Hansen, District 12.
I'm Ken Witt, the County Administrator.
Heather Amos, Corporation Counsel.
Ellen Denzer, Community Development Director.
J.R. Ballard, Park Administrator.
John Hilgers, Planner, Community Development.
Tim Stieber, Resource Management Administrator.
Carrie Weiss, UW Madison Division of Extension Area Director.
Julie Peterson, Community Development Department.
Thank you. Next, we have the approval of last month's minutes. Did everybody have a chance to take a look at that? And do we have any corrections or complaints, suggestions? Very good. They'll stand as approved. Next, we'll move into public comment. I only have two sheets. The first one would be Mr. Bill Peavy. And folks, I'd remind you that this is public comment. That's any public comment on or off the agenda except those things that are not related to everything that's not related to the rezonings, the two rezonings that we have on the agenda.
Okay. Good evening, everybody, and thank you for the committee for letting me speak. My name is William Peavy. I live at 2530 County Road N, Woodville. I would like to comment on the railroad right-of-way that the county calls the Wildwood Trail. I own approximately 640s, either bisected by or adjacent to the trail. Well, we are a century farm, been there since 1914, and our family has used the railroad right-of-way continuously for at least 75 years to access the woods that at one time we rented and we now own. It's difficult to comment because I don't know what Mr. Witt's comments are going to be later on, so we may be stepping on each other or have different ideas. But I believe there have been some positive developments. There's been a change in leadership at the county parks. I participated in 2 meetings with Administrator Witt and Corp Counsel Amos. We exchanged 2 possible solutions drafted with the help of Mike Osley's attorney. Received 1 possible solution from the county. No solution to concerns yet, but I believe one is possible. And I hope to continue discussions with the county. In my case, I also hope to avoid significant costs for the landowners and for the county. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Peavy. Next, we have Tracy Helgerson.
I also want to thank you for giving me an opportunity to speak. Like Mr. Peavy, my wife and I own property in sections 23 and 26 of O'Galley Township, purchasing this land in May of 1994. This property's been in our family since 1960, and it lies on both sides of the trail. Without us crossing the railroad right-of-way, we have 52.5 acres of landlocked property. Over the past 65 years, our family has freely crossed the railroad right-of-way at will without dispute or conflict. Said in another way, we have peacefully coexisted with the county's sponsored public use of the trail for years, up until recently. With the county's escalation and assertion of ownership of the Wildwood Trail in 2022, it has left us disappointed and with many questions. The latest frustration being a $200 fine threat for simply crossing the trail to access our property, utilizing the same crossing that we've had in place even before the railroad company abandoned the area. We want to make it known that we do not support the county's decision to create a confrontational relationship with landowners along the trail, potentially jeopardizing a long-time peaceful coexistence. We urge the community development meeting to revisit the county's recent disputed claim of ownership. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Helgeson. Hugh Gwynn, next up.
My name is Hugh Gwynn. I'm an attorney in Hudson. I've been practicing in this county for over 50 years. I have, as part of my practice, been extensively involved in real estate and real estate-related matters. I've been a licensed title insurance agent, a real estate broker, in addition to an attorney, and I have represented a number of municipalities over the years in this county. So I think I have a view of both from the municipal side as well as the private ownership side of disputes or things like this. I have argued a real estate course in front of the Wisconsin Supreme Court, and I would just like to clarify something. When the county got this land from the railroad in 1970, is that somewhere around there, the county got a quitclaim deed. Now, in real estate, there are many different forms of deeds. There are personal representative deeds, there are trust deeds, there are warranty deeds, there are quitclaim deeds. The quitclaim deed is the lowest form of deed as far as what it conveys. It really says, from the seller's point of view, we don't know if we have any interest in this, but whatever interest we have in this, we're conveying to you. There's no warranty on it. The railroad doesn't have to back it up. So I don't know what the title exam, if any, was done at the time the county bought this. If a complete one was done, as has, I believe, been done now as a result of these disputes, it shows that the county there are not reversionary clauses from the railroad to the adjoining landowners from whence the railroad right-of-way originally came. There are, I think, 3 parcels where that applies. There are 5 or 6 other parcels where certain other rights were reserved to the landowners. If you've been involved with with railroads at all, you know that when they're in front of the Public Service Commission and they want to abandon a railway line, all you're going to hear is how we can't make any money at it. This line is worthless. Please let us abandon it. Once it becomes abandoned, you would usually think that the sale prices that the railroad wants to sell it back to adjoining landowners, or for some other purpose, there was a gold mine underneath it. In this case, the railroad sold 8 acres of land in St. Croix County for $1,500 with no warranty. They could not have regarded it as very valuable. And I think, while I don't represent any specific landowner in this matter, I have consulted with some of them, and I think the increased, I'll say, unilateral enforcement of a right-of-way by the county, not recognizing the historic rights of some of the landowners, has been part of the problem that has caused this issue to get to where it is now. And it's been divisive, and I think there's a way to resolve it. There have been several drafts of suggested easements from other council who are involved in this matter. I just would remind the county that there are rights of other landowners that have not been recognized by the county, irrespective of the alleged $2 million that the county has put into improving and developing this trail, which goes from Woodville down to the county line, the southern county line of St. Croix County. So just be aware, just because the county got a deed doesn't mean that they got all the rights of the underlying landowners at the time they got the deed, and I would ask that you consider that in whatever deliberations you have. There may not be deliberations today, but certainly going forward, as those deliberations with other council and the county are ongoing. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Gwynn. Is there anybody else who'd like to make a public comment on or off the agenda, except for the items which are up for public hearing? And I'll give you one more chance. All right. Did you already spoke?
I may be misunderstood, but I thought Hugh said they bought 8 acres for $1,500.
You'll have to ask Mr. Gwynn later. He said what he said, and we let that stand during public comment. Whatever he said is what he said. So there'll be no discussion about public comment. All right. We're going to move into our public hearing, and just so I can clarify my intention how we're going to handle this, we're going to do the first public hearing, and then we're going to move into the first business items so that the items of the public hearing are fresh for the committee to discuss. When that is finished, we will move into the second public hearing and then take the second business item. Are we clear? Do we all understand that? Good. All right. May we have a staff report from John Hilger on the first public hearing?
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and committee members. The first item on your agenda tonight is a public hearing for a rezoning application in the town of Kinnikinnick. The property owner applicants are Brian and Patty Lawrence. The request before the committee tonight is to rezone approximately 24 acres from the R2 residential district to the Ag 2 agricultural district. The applicant is requesting the rezoning tonight in order to conduct agricultural entertainment uses on the property, to include weddings, wine tasting, and fall activities, which was stated in the application. Agricultural entertainment uses include farm-based businesses or enterprises that combine elements and characteristics of agriculture and tourism. Real quickly, we'll just refresh for the committee members and those in attendance what the definition of agricultural entertainment includes. It includes a wide array of farm and farm-related activities, including outdoor recreation, educational experiences, entertainment, and hospitality services. The Ag 2 zoning district would allow up to 15 agricultural entertainment events per year. If the applicant would choose to exceed the 15 events per year, a conditional use permit would be required with the Board of Adjustment. And the Board of Adjustment would review that process, the application, and assign appropriate conditions. An administrative land use permit would be required if the number of attendees in any one event would exceed 100 persons. And so the land use permit would need to identify plans for parking, days and hours of operations, sanitation, solid waste management, directional signs, and ingress and egress to the site. In addition, the zoning administrator also has the discretion to require a land use permit should questions arise on how zoning requirements would be incorporated into the site, such as parking, site circulation, and adequacy of water and sewer supply. In addition, the applicant would be required to secure any necessary building permits if needed from the town of Kinnikinnick. And again, the towns in St. Croix County administer their own building code and building permit procedure. The next few slides, we're just going to take a look at the location map. The first location map, the address of the site, 331 County Road Double J, indicated by the red arrow, the 24 acres at the intersection of County J and Double J. Double J runs north-south, and J runs east-west. Next, we'll take a quick look at an aerial photo of the site. Again, the 24 acres are highlighted in red. You'll see on the property the Kinnikinnick River borders the southern boundary of the property with associated wetlands and a floodplain area that we'll talk about briefly. You'll see the single-family residence at the point of my cursor, the horse barn boarding facility, and then associated pastures for the horses. You'll see a row of evergreen trees along the west side of the property. The Kinnick Town Hall is kind of on the very west edge of the map, and then you see some of the scattered residential home sites abutting the site. Next, we'll just pan out a little bit further. It gives you a broader perspective of the regional area. Again, the single-family residence off of County J, more agricultural to the south and east, single-family residences to the west of the site, the town hall, as shown there. Next, we just took a couple of Google Street views. This is a view of the site looking southeast from the intersection of J and Double J. Again, you'll see the horse pastures in the foreground. The blue arrow indicates the location of where the horse barn facility is. This is another view looking southwest from County Road JJ. Again, we noted the entertainment facility with the blue arrow at the back of the slide. We had a number of questions from residents not knowing what their distance was from the potential ag entertainment facility. So staff took the liberty of adding a slide that just shows approximate distances. We were not trying to single out any residences. This was just more to give the committee an idea of the distances. 700 feet approximately to the single family homes on the north side of J. You'll see about 545 to a dwelling structure to the east, and then the other two structures to the west. Just generally describing some of the features of the property, the areas you see in yellow are properties that are zoned R2 residential. And basically R2 residential allows most agricultural uses. The R2 is simply associated with the residential density that can take place on the property. And currently they would be allowed 2-acre lots. And I believe in the town of Kinnikinnick they allow minor subdivisions which would allow 4 lots every 5 years to be platted. Also, we'll note that you'll see the single-family parcels. They range in size from 1.2 to 2.4 acres, kind of on the north side of County J. There is an approximate 11-acre homestead on the east side of the site, and again, the larger agricultural parcels to the south. And again, the property includes a residential dwelling, the larger horse boarding facility, and related pastures, and an area with approximately 225 grapevines. Next, we take a look at comprehensive plans, and they do play a role in how rezonings are reviewed by staff. So official zoning maps and ordinances that are enacted or amended, such as the rezoning tonight, are required to be consistent with the local government unit's comprehensive plan. And this is dictated in statute 66-1000.1. For the benefit of residents, I'll basically describe what a comprehensive plan is. A comprehensive plan is a policy document that conveys the future vision of the jurisdiction, in this case, the town of Kinnikinnick. And the plan typically includes maps, goals, objectives, and policies such as land use, transportation, agricultural, and economic development. The comprehensive plan provides guidance on issues such as rezoning applications that we're reviewing tonight so that the decisions the committee make are not considered arbitrary or random in nature. So first, we're going to take a look at the future land use plan map for the town of Kinnick. The parcel is highlighted in yellow at the tip of the red arrow, and it's a very broad policy area. The town identified this area as agricultural residential, again, the area that you see in white. Under the town of Kinnick comprehensive plan, the statements, goals, and summary, the agricultural residential designated area are established for agricultural uses, commercial uses serving agriculture, and limited residential uses. Land use decisions will protect economic interests and property rights, maintain the diversity in agriculturally related areas, encourage the preservation of farming options, including hobby farms, the ability to farm by existing and future operations. The current agricultural residential category in the town comprehensive plan supports participation of landowners in the Farmland Preservation Plan program, which we'll briefly talk about in a bit, and allows eligibility for agricultural zoning, which is Ag 1 or Ag 2, and again, the applicant is requesting the Agricultural 2 district. Ag 1 and Ag 2 zoning district restricts residential development in order to preserve and promote agriculture. So in the Ag 2 district, residential development is limited to 1 unit per 20 acres of density, and the Ag 1 is limited to 1 unit per 40 acres. So again, quite a bit of difference between the R2, you can do 2-acre lots versus what you're allowed in the Ag 1 and Ag 2 districts. Next, we take a look at the St. Croix County Comprehensive Plan. Just like the town, the county has a future land use plan map. The St. Croix County Comprehensive Plan designates the subject area as mixed rural agriculture, The intent of this district is to preserve productive agricultural lands while allowing some residential development, protect existing farm and forestry operations, promote further investments in farming, and preserve wildlife habitat and open spaces. These uses can include farmlands, scattered open lands, wooded areas, ag-related uses, cottage industries, and limited low-density single-family development. And for practical purposes, the county plan identifies that a number of zoning districts could be included in this category, ranging from Ag 1 and Ag 2 to the R1 and R2 districts. And then finally, the last item we'd like to mention as far as planning documents go, the subject parcel is also designated on the St. Croix County Farmland Preservation Plan map, which is shown below. You see the highlight parcel highlighted in red circle with the tip of the red arrow. This map was adopted in 2012 and uses a LISA system of scoring. And the LISA is an acronym system that stands for Land Evaluation and Site Assessment. And so this system of scoring was developed by the Soil Conservation Service from the U.S. Department of Ag for planning, policy development, and decision making, but refined to accommodate local soil conditions. The LISA system was used to identify productive ag lands and activities and provide a relative rating of potential preservation areas. And so some of the things that are looked at when we scored these properties were soil types, erodibility, soil classifications, steep slopes. The site assessment dealt more with what policies the town had in place. And so some towns in the county did not support agricultural activities in our comprehensive plan. And these were towns that were more on the developing western side of the county. So they really don't have the ability to zone into Ag 1 or Ag 2. A little bit different as you move to the middle of the county and the east side of the county, and like Kinnick, they do have the option to zone into that category. Next, we're just going to take a quick look at some of the natural resource management plan features. Again, the parcel highlighted in blue. The subject parcel is included within an environmental corridor and corresponds to the Kinnick River and associated shoreland, wetland, and floodplains area. And basically, an environmental corridor is a singular or series of environmental resources, including lakes, ponds, rivers, streams, steep slopes, wetlands, natural features that we do map. Next, we take a look at the shoreland, wetland, and floodplain limitations on the parcel. And there is quite a bit going on the southern edge of the parcel closest to the Kinnick River. So part of the property is included within a shoreland area. These are areas within 300 feet of a navigable stream. These areas are regulated through St. Croix County Chapter 16 shoreland zoning. And these areas establish setbacks, impervious area, land disturbance, and lot size requirements. And these provisions are administered by the county on behalf of the DNR. Chapter 18 floodplain, you'll see some of the area. We do have some minor floodplain areas along the river. We also have a floodplain zoning ordinance that regulates the use of property based on flooding potential and includes elevated structure requirements. So whenever these facilities were built, mapping it, the single family home and the boarding facility is outside of all these natural areas. Next, we take a look at steep slopes. The site is relatively flat. We do have some steep slopes just south of the Homestead site, and then gradually drops in elevation until you get to the Kinnickinnic River. Next, we take a look at governmental agency review. With all rezoning applications, we do ask the town for recommendations. Some towns do provide recommendations, some towns do not. The Town of Kinnickinnic Town Board reviewed this request on May 2nd, and they did recommend approval of the rezoning application. Because the parcel also abuts 2 county roads, we also had our St. Croix County Highway Department review the request to take a look at the existing access to see if the contemplated uses would have any impact on the county road system. And upon review, the Highway Department did not have any concerns related to the rezoning. The rezoning application was also forwarded to the DNR, Wisconsin DNR, for their review, and we did get some comments back. We kind of put them in the packet at the bottom of the page. But in summary, they basically state that impacts in the shoreland floodplain area should be avoided. Standards are in place that the county should enforce, which we will. And those comments are fairly straightforward, but we did include them in your packet. Next, we just take a look at some technical review findings, some of the policies that the county has in their comp plan. We talked a little bit about the Kinnickinnic comp plan, but basically the county comp plan supports efforts which increases the viability and diversity of agriculture throughout the county, support agriculturally based businesses that encourage the viability and diversity of agriculture in the community, and provide for a balance of land use types throughout the county. The proposed rezoning should be consistent or not in conflict with the St. Croix County Natural Resource Management Plan. Again, we just kind of highlighted some of the features in the prior maps. The development of the property should comply with Chapter 15 zoning. And then for the committee consideration tonight, should the committee choose to recommend approval for rezoning, it would be subject to the following provisions: that the rezoning and proposed use is consistent with the St. Croix County Comprehensive Plan and Town Comprehensive Plan, that it be consistent with the St. Croix County Natural Resource Management Plan, and that the rezoning and proposed use is consistent with the St. Croix County zoning ordinance, and that the town has not disapproved the rezoning request, and that the rezoning and proposed use is consistent with the comprehensive plan and does not result in spot zoning. So in terms of the committee action tonight, there are a number of alternatives the committee could pursue. You could recommend approval of the zoning amendment, recommend disapproval, or you could table the request for additional information and discussion. This can be based on public comment received prior to and at the public hearing. And obviously you were able to see some of the letters in your packet, but obviously we'll have some additional comments tonight. So the committee will need to take those into consideration as far as whatever action you choose to take. As with all applications, staff is asked to provide a recommendation for the committee consideration. Based on the application submittal, staff would recommend approval of the rezoning amendment to the Ag 2 district based on the following findings. Based on technical review findings 1 through 5, the rezoning is consistent with the policies in the county comprehensive plan, the town comprehensive plan, and the county natural resource management plan. The future land use plan maps and land use category and descriptions within both plans of the Town of Kinney and St. Croix County would support the rezoning request to Ag 2. The St. Croix County Farmland Preservation Plan and agricultural chapter of the comprehensive plan would support the rezoning request. The Town of Kinnick Town Board has recommended approval of the rezoning request, and the proposed use is consistent with and can comply with standards in Chapter 15. Some additional considerations, and this will be the last comment, so some additional considerations for the committee, again, based on any additional testimony you hear tonight. You may choose to table for additional information or direction that you might want to provide to staff for consideration at a future meeting. And should the CDC, the committee, want to consider additional findings based on public comment or recommend disapproval of the rezoning, they should direct staff to develop findings of support for either of the CDC directions tonight. So that concludes the overview. And again, I just want to remind the committee that you do have comments in your packet that were provided by residents who submitted them by email. So those are in the packet. And as we said earlier, we'll have some additional comments tonight that the committee can consider. Thank you.
Excellent job, John. All right, at this point, this is how this will work. We're going to take comments that are in favor first, and then we'll take comments opposed to the rezoning. So at this point, people who have signed up to speak on this rezoning, who are in favor of the rezoning, will ask you to speak first. So who would like to go first? Who would like to speak in favor of the rezoning? Certainly. Sir, go ahead. I believe John has some supportive material ready for you. This is a one.
Okay. So I'm Brian Lawrence, and I'm the applicant. So I just wanted to provide a brief overview of what we have planned here, just to clarify a few things, because I know there's been some information provided to you already, and I just want to clarify my intentions a bit for not only you, but anybody else in the room. So as you can see, this is our property, which John already kind of covered, and I just want to call your attention. This is the view from Jay. This is my horse barn and arena, and I have a shop at the far end of this facility, which I'll make a comment about later. So I just want to let you know that my shop is way at the far end of this facility, and this is the other view, which John kind of had to in the other direction there. So the process that I followed, I contacted zoning, filled out an application. I contacted the Kinnick Town Chair for his thoughts and inputs. You can see his comments there. Then I submitted the application and requested to be on the Township Planning Committee. So I did that and received approval there. And I did have one neighbor attend that meeting and raise no questions or concerns at the meeting. So I'll make another comment later on something where I was kind of caught off guard. Requested to be on the town board agenda, and I received approval there and said next step is the public hearing, which brings us tonight. So learning so far, I received the written comments, et cetera, that were submitted for today's meeting. I just want to clarify a few things, maybe on my intentions, so to speak, So I did not go out and talk to my neighbors verbally. And I was trying to push something through quickly, but I just wanted to highlight, I was trying to follow a process. I've never been through this before. And I just, because I'd followed the process. In hindsight, I wish I would have talked to my neighbors ahead of time. No questions about it. So that's a big learning for me. So in hindsight, I did go out over the last several days or past week to talk to my neighbors, to explain some things, what I was planning, to clarify some things. And I think one of the things a theme that was kind of, as I looked at information, that I was building an event center, that I had some, I'll say maybe fairly elaborate plans or something like that, or big plans. I'm not building anything. I'm following, what's been outlined in the zoning and the agricultural entertainment, so I kind of just wanted to learn that. And it's not a commercial wedding venue, because I think I felt there was quite a bit of people asking about that. So I did clarify that to some of the neighbors already. And I just kind of learned that in absence of information, sometimes you get some speculation. So that's where I kind of wish I would have did a little bit different process. This was mentioned already that I do have a bunch of grapevines planted, and wine tastings would be done in my existing shop. And that's one building I highlighted on the beginning slide, kind of that is very farthest point away from many of my neighbors. And other planned activities include fall pumpkins and apples, because we planted a bunch of apple trees, Christmas trees, horseback riding activities. I do run a boarding facility now. I do have horses on my property, so it's probably a continuation of some of that. Addressing the concerns, I just, again, want to re-highlight, this request is not for a commercial wedding venue. I have no interest in something like that. There was concern on loud noises, so I thought I might as well address that. I always follow county and township regulations in this area. There would not be fireworks. I have horses on my property, so fireworks do not go well with horses. Traffic, I guess, was already covered by John. And then I also want to bring something to your attention that I did volunteer to be on the Kinnickinnick Township Planning Committee because they were looking for people. Now that was volunteering was started after I started this process. So I think there's maybe some people felt there was an intent that I got on the Planning Commission to push this particular request through, which and maybe I have totally misunderstood, but that was never the intention. And because I've worked at 3M for a great many years, and maybe thought it'd be time for me to do some public service. And bottom line is that we live here too, and we take pride in keeping things nice. This is that photos of where I would do tastings. This is my shop building that I showed on the far end of the property. And I kind of have one summary slide here for you. In summary, our overall vision is to create a place that is family friendly, fun for adults and kids, a chance for kids to get outside and learn. We've held some pony days where kids learn about and ride horses. Been extremely well received. I deem this, there is a high demand in this type of activity, and we want to build on that. And we want our Kinney Farms to be an opportunity for families to enjoy the farm setting with apples, horses, grapes, pumpkins, etc. And a wine tasting room as an opportunity to try to bring community together. So I just wanted to provide you some clarification on my intent. I guess I could have did a paper handout, but I didn't. I maybe should have did that, but anyways, did the PowerPoint for today. So I think that's really all the planned remarks I had. It's questions. I think you I don't know if you have questions for me now, or I'll just ask yourself on where do you want to go next?
I think we're going to let the rest of the public have their say, and when the committee begins to talk among themselves, if we have a question for you, we'll ask you to come back up for questions.
Sounds good. Thanks for your time.
Is there anybody else from the public who would like to speak in favor of this rezoning?
I didn't sign up for it ahead of time.
We'll ask you to sign after you.
Oh, I signed in over there.
Okay, then step up to the podium, say your name, your address, and
My name is Bart Bartos. I live right across the street from Brian and Patty. Literally, I have the house that's closest to their building. I think calling it an event center is a little bit of a exaggeration. It's really just a horse barn and a shop, a nice shop. I'm jealous. I wish I had. But I have known them since they moved in. I've lived there for 10 years. They've lived there a little less time. But as a neighbor, I'm not concerned that they're going to, have some large business that's going to be loud and rowdy every weekend night. You've seen the pictures. They're very accurate. It's agriculture area. They have horses in 4 different large pens to the north and another one to the back. I have no fears of what their plans are. And like I said, my house is literally the closest one that you saw on that one map. That's 400 feet away or whatever. So I just wanted to express my approval for their rezoning and their future projects. Thank you.
thanks, Bart. Is there anybody else who'd like to speak in favor of the project? please step up to the podium. Say your name and address. Say your piece.
Hey, everybody. I'm actually new to the community. My name is Dylan Kozier. I live actually kitty corner where, you know, a lot of the discussions were around the properties across from where Mr. Lawrence and Miss Lawrence live. I'm new to the community as of about 2 to 3 months ago. So it's great to be out here. I come from a suburban area. When I first moved out here, I was actually really happy because my father is a farmer, born and raised, and we found that there was actually pumpkin farms very close nearby. If you actually go north, I don't know the exact name of this street, but if you go to the very end of it, there is actually pumpkin farms up there. There are apple tree farms, and that was one thing that I personally really enjoyed around the Halloween time. So my family, they do still live over in the western suburbs of Minneapolis. They've been coming out, visiting me, helping me, you know, move into my new house here. And personally, I love this idea, getting my family out here. As I start to build a family for myself, it would be lovely to have something like this, especially because, I mean, I'm personally within walking distance, but having additional things like this, I'm personally in favor of. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Would anybody else like to speak in favor of this rezoning? One more chance. Would anybody else like to speak in favor of this rezoning? All right. Would anybody like to speak in opposition to this rezoning? Mr. Peterson.
My name is Dave Peterson. I reside at 1299 County Road J. And I'm thoroughly opposed to the requested zoning change. I won't take up committee time reiterating a lot of things you're going to hear from my neighbors. I put most of my thoughts on concerns into the letter that I preceded the hearing here. Please bear in mind, though, that the county's zoning ordinances were totally reviewed and overhauled approximately 2 years ago, I believe now. And I have no doubt that there are unintended consequences in some areas that when they come to light will either need to be corrected or readdressed, have another look-see at. I'm sure it is not the intent of the ordinances to allow wedding venues and associated loud music and alcohol consumption in a clearly residential area. Your dilemma today will be, in my opinion, after dealing with the details of the ordinance, to decide to rule in favor of the overwhelming number of neighbors who oppose a requested zoning change for reasons stated in the package, or approve a single resident who requests change from established R2 zoning that the comprehensive planners deemed appropriate for the area to Ag 2, which would enable, in my opinion, totally inappropriate venue in that setting. And whether the current owner indicates he will or would not have wedding venues of the zoning would allow in Ag 2 up to 15 events. He could sell that property in 6 months, and the next owner could do it without any approval. They would already have the tacit approval. So thank you very much for accepting my comments.
Thank you, Dave. Would anybody else like to speak against this rezoning? Sir? Go ahead. State your name and address, please, and say your piece.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity. My name's Terry Higgins. I live at 311 County Road JJ. I'm the neighbor to Mr. Lawrence on his south. Our boundary kind of is the Kinnickinnic River. And I live on nearly 400 acres of land and have lived there for the past 22 years. I relocated from the Bay Area, big suburban area, and was very anxious to move to this community for the tranquility, the pastoral feel the love of nature, the beauty of the Kinnickinnick, and I'm gravely opposed to any rezoning that would allow or open the door to any kind of development and bring in what I would consider more potential crime elements. I've already suffered theft and lots of trespassing on my property, and I just consider with bringing more people into the area would just increase that probability. And to kind of, in keeping with the rest of what my neighbors, I think, are feeling or what they've shared with me, it's to have a business there with, as Mr. Peterson said, noise, traffic, alcohol, is not the reason we all chose to live in this area. It's actually quite the contrary in terms of development. So just to let you know that I am not in favor of this rezoning, and I appreciate the opportunity to let me share my thoughts.
Thank you, ma'am. Again, somebody who would like to speak against. Sir. And please, if you're speaking, make sure you've signed up, and thank you.
My name is Mark Lear. I live at 1320 Steeple Drive. The concerns I have about this is, number one, we are an agriculture area. I don't know if any one of your committee members know, if you have a 9500 John Deere combine with a 6-row head on, you got 2 feet on each side of the road. So if we have, during harvest time, you got combines, you got tractors that are 14, 16 feet wide going up and down that road and on County Road J. Also, you have kids that park there and jump into the creek, and you have people that have ATUs that drive up and down there for the area we moved into. My main concern is safety. The second thing is, if somebody comes out of there and there's a combine coming down and he's got half the road blocked up, there could be an accident there. We're in St. Croix County, we're already short 15 officers, and I can't say that we'll have anything there to protect the people that are here or to protect our properties. I don't begrudge somebody for trying, but you also have to remember we're a farming community. And I followed a tractor up there today. I measured it when he stopped by my place. With the piece of equipment he had on the back, dual wheels on this tractor, he was at 18 feet. So if you go down County Road J, Double J, with an 18-foot tractor pulling a 24-foot disc, and you got a car coming toward you, or you got somebody pulling out of there, that tractor can't stop that quick. And either he's going to cause an accident, or he's going to get hurt, or she, either one. So I am strongly against this. I've said my piece. Have a good day, but think of the safety of the farmers.
I appreciate you coming. Anybody else like to speak in opposition to this rezoning? Please step up to the microphone. State your address and your name.
Hi, my name is Kelly Vaught. I live at 1297 County Road J, and we share that east property line with the Lawrences. I'd like to start by thanking you for letting me speak tonight. And I'm going to quote from the Town of Kinnickinnick Comprehensive Plan, which I looked over. In the Town of Kinnickinnick should invite participation from all residents at every level of the decision-making process, evaluate projects and actions based on how they improve the entire area, select options that don't impose an unfair burden on individual property owners. This decision would be what the community wants, keep traffic volume low on town roads, preserve the rural character of the town. Small businesses do not create a nuisance for neighboring property owners by generating excessive traffic, noise, lighting, etc. And I'm done quoting. So rezoning the Lawrence property would directly contradict most of these tenets, if not all of them. He states he will have weddings, reunions, wine tastings, fall events, etc. These events will place an unfair burden on his many close neighbors with higher traffic volumes, light pollution in the night, public intoxication, drunk driving, trespassing, and intrusive noise. This does not benefit the community or improve the area. Mr. Lawrence and the town chair, Jerry Olson, had a private conversation before the town commission meeting and decided between them that they did not have any concerns about how these events would affect the community. This was very presumptuous and certainly did not include participation from town residents, and it wasn't discussed at the meeting that my husband attended, the planning commission meeting of the town of Kinnickinnick. Mr. Lawrence did not notify any of his neighbors until he realized there was opposition to rezoning, and it was then that he mentioned he may only have a few small gatherings. Even if the Lawrences say they only intend to have small activities, there is no guarantee that the current or future owners won't decide to have all of the events allowed at the maximum capacity. These venues could proceed even if the community objects. The town should not set a precedence for allowing disruptive businesses in rural residential communities. And I also noticed when John was speaking, he said there shouldn't be spot zoning. I don't know if that applies, but it worked into my speech. So there's also another subdivision rezoning request in process for a property on Liberty Road, very close by. So now we have the potential to have 30 events with up to 100 people, each in a very small geographical area every weekend. The town infrastructure is not equipped to handle this kind of rapid, disorganized growth and the disorder that these events could possibly create. The roads are narrow and dark. EMS and law enforcement are not staffed to handle this kind of influx, and the pressure on nature would be significant with large groups of people repeatedly damaging the ecosystem. We need to step back and assess the current resources of the township, the pressures that these requested zone changes would create, and develop an organized plan before approving any rezoning that has the potential to create large intrusive businesses affecting quiet rural neighborhoods and nearby wildlife areas. And I would like to say there's a large flat area that is directly next to our house and owned by the Lawrences, which would be a natural overflow spot for a lot of activities. So in summary, this rezoning request would not improve the area. Neighbors directly adjacent to the property are all opposed, and I'm talking about on this side. And then the majority of the people in the neighborhood, and finally, rezoning would place an unfair burden on the surrounding property owners, infrastructure, and ecosystem. Thank you for letting me speak.
Thank you, ma'am. Is there anybody else who'd like to speak against? Sir, please come up to the podium.
My name is Brian Vaught. That's my wife. I live at 1297 County Road J. So we are the house right there. I want to point out there are homes. There's 1, 2, 3, 4 more homes that aren't reflected in this picture that you see. So there's a lot of homes in that neighborhood. It's kind of in a valley. Sound doesn't get out of there very easily. This is not personal. I just think that this property was residential too when the Lawrences bought it, and I'd like to see it stay that way. Our primary concern is that there's too many homes. This has kind of turned into a neighborhood, and we're fine with that. We knew that when we moved out there that was going to happen eventually. There's nothing to guarantee that later on this could turn into something much bigger than it is, and it's going to be hard to monitor that. And County Road J, I can't prove this, has really gotten busy. Since they've widened the road, since they fixed the road, I mean, I know a lot of people I talk to, if they're in Hammond or if they're in west of Baldwin, they take J to River Falls or Prescott now, where they used to go over to 65. So it has gotten a lot bigger. There's a lot of homes in this area that would be affected. I'm just opposed to it. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Would anybody else like to speak against this rezoning? Sir, go ahead. Have you signed? Thank you.
Good
evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Hawkins Loomis. I live in 364 Old Cemetery. So I live on that private drive on the opposite side of the field in this area right here. What's the most important thing in our life? Our future. Ergo, our children, correct? That tends to be the usual statement, correct? Between my wife and I, we have 9 children. Now, my fear is, with the previous speaker here, is this turning into something bigger, all right? Especially with the sound. So the neighbors across the field, like I can hear their kids outside playing. Now with an event center, that much more noise pollution, nobody moves to the country to feel like they're living in town for that specific reason. That's why we decided to move there. That's my children's safety, as well as I moved to the country for a reason. I'm not trying to be bothered with all an influx of populace, ultimately. That's about all I got to say.
Appreciate your comments. There's one more I saw.
Hello, my name is Lisa Christensen, and I live at 1280 County Road J, which is right across the property from the Lawrences. And I submitted a letter last week, and I hope you all had a chance to read it. I just had a couple things I wanted to add to it. The first thing is, about 2 years ago, between 2 and 3 years ago, the previous owners of the property back here, M. Holtz's, before Jerry sold his property, he had a big wedding for his family, which was fine. We knew about it. We didn't have a problem with it, but we heard every bit of music and partying that came out of that red shed. So yes, the noise travels there very much. We can hear the interstate sometimes, depending. And then the other thing I wanted to add was the Lawrences may not have intention to do anything big, and that's fine. But what happens when they sell it? What happens when somebody comes in and buys it because they know it's egg too, and they can do whatever they want with it? That's my biggest concern. So thank you very much for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Anybody else like to speak against this rezoning? Em, you're welcome to. And you've signed? Okay.
My name is Krista Paschal. I live at 372 Old Cemetery Road, which is right here. My property actually looks over the cornfield onto this property, past the historic church. Mr. Lawrence says that he is now not going to do wedding venues, but that's not what his application says. In his application, he makes a lot of statements that are very broad and misleading. He doesn't take into consideration the fact that the Kinney is one of the natural wetlands or natural trout streams, and it's been classified that by the Wisconsin DNR. He says he wants his guests to enjoy that, but what about the neighbors? We moved there and bought our land to enjoy that. And now, because one person wants to change that, it's going to affect all of us neighbors. He makes a lot of statements about, talking to the town chair. Well, I did also, and the town chair flat out told me that was a private conversation between the two of them because they used to work together. It was not on any board meeting. It was not in the presence of any kind of organization. It was the two of them having a private conversation. So that's an extremely misleading statement also. I also am very concerned about St. Croix County having to respond to anything and everything in Kinnickinnick. We do not have police. We do not have fire. We're all St. Croix County. We're pretty far from this building. It takes a while to get to our home. We've had situations where we've had the sheriff have to come out, for different things around there. And believe me, it takes a while for the sheriff to get there. So to add extra stress to our sheriff's department, I think that's an extremely irresponsible thing to do as a community. And that's really all I have to say. I did have a handout that I did give Ellen to give everyone, so.
It's already been provided.
Wonderful.
Both
Thank
handouts
you.
were.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you. And again, I'll ask, is there anybody else who'd like to speak against this rezoning? Ma'am? And have you signed? I have. Thank you.
So my name is Andrea Carpenter, and this is actually the first time meeting my country neighbors. I'm at 1292 County Road J, which is right in this area here. My 4 young boys are probably the little voices that that other gentleman was talking about, because we moved to the country for that reason. We wanted them to have space, and we wanted them to feel like they could feel safe, private, secure. I just scratched down a few notes. We recently moved there, as I mentioned, in September of last year, and it was never in our parameters that we sent to our real estate agent that we would like to be 700 feet from a business. Had that been the case, I don't know that we would be living in that house. And again, I agree with many comments here tonight that the intent and the vision today could change tomorrow, and definitely it could change as the property changes hands. Forgive me. I also have notes here that while we're trying to teach our boys the guidelines of playing in the yard, that I can't guarantee that the traffic that would have to pass by, potentially take a wrong turn, come into the driveway, if people are impaired, how their driving would be as they're passing by our house. So it's another thing that we're considering as we're discussing this at night as to how this would affect how safe we would feel if the kids were playing in the yard, as well as the noise disturbances and just the overall increase in traffic, and just with folks being out there that don't necessarily know the area, and don't really have the regard and the respect for it that the rest of us do that chose to live there and bring our families there for the preservation and the love of nature. So, thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Again, I'll ask, is there anybody who would like to speak against this rezoning? Sir, have you signed? I have. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Michael Miller. I live at 392 Old Cemetery Road, which is right there, just off the map. I've been there for 23 years. I've been a Western Wisconsin resident for 68 years. So I am a little familiar with this area. But I'm not going to argue about rezoning or not, Ag 2 versus residential. That's not the issue I think that's in front of you. If I read 15.2.221, I'll read the preliminary part, provide for a wide range of agricultural accessory, and agricultural related uses at various scales of operation while providing for the minimum lot area necessary. The second part accommodates uses which are commercial or industrial in nature, are associated with agricultural production, and require a rural location due to extensive land areas needed or proximity to agricultural resources and which do not require urban services. I would have a question for corporate counsel. Each one of those requirements for accommodated use is followed by a semicolon. My assumption is that means and, not or. And if it's and, then the question becomes, is a wedding venue an agriculturally related use? From my perspective, no, absolutely not. Not remotely located to agricultural uses. I think that's the start and the ending of this discussion. You're outside of what your own zoning requirements call for. We can talk about what a nice venue this could be, and it could be. Certainly, it's a wonderful setting. It could be small parties, could be small groups of weddings of 25 people. But if you approve this for use, it could also be wedding parties of 300 people with uncontrolled alcohol consumption. This is Wisconsin we live in, right? We have 300-person wedding parties, and people drink. I got married a long time ago. I know how that works. No, I'm not in favor of it because it's outside of your own zoning requirements. Thank you.
Thank you very kindly. Would anyone else like to speak against this rezoning? Going twice. Sir, please step up to the microphone. State your name. Have you signed?
Yes.
Thank you.
My name is Alan Klein, and I live at 1325 County Road J. And I just want to, with trying not to repeat what's already been said, I want you to think for a little bit about what wedding dances you've been to lately. I was at one last summer in an adjoining township where you couldn't talk to another person in the barn where the dancing was going on because of the volume of the music. And we're talking primarily about weekends here, I would assume, for wedding dances. That's the normal time. And if you think about the fact that there could be 15 per year, as I understand it, and that could be every Saturday night in June, July, August, and then 2 more. So I just think that it's not an appropriate thing to have in an agricultural area, and I'm opposed to it.
Thank you, sir. Is there anyone else? Speak opposed? I will ask 3 times. Is there anyone else who would like to oppose this rezoning? Would anyone else like to oppose this rezoning? Therefore, I will close this public hearing, and we will take this up as business item number 1, and I'll turn to the committee. And as is our practice, we will seek a motion to begin the process. A motion of some sort.
I make a motion we table this request for additional information. It seems as if something was missing when this went through the town of Kinnickinnick, the town board. We see before us tonight letters from 38 people who are opposed to this, and we hear one person speak who wants it. And I can see that we all want to do our own thing, but I think we also have to be sensitive to the needs and wishes of those we have to live with. I mean, this is a community we're looking at here, even though it's a rural community. And a lot of good comments have come up that, yes, Mr. Lorenz says he's not planning on any wedding venues now, but...
Jerry, I don't mean to be rude. Let's separate the argument from the motion.
Okay, let's just follow the motion. That's the reason why.
So the motion to table...
To table this considering this at all.
All right, do we have a second?
Are you making the motion to table to a date certain or indefinitely?
As of right now, indefinitely until we have a date certain. Does that make sense?
No.
You know, well, here's my point. Something has to be done before we would consider it again.
So I would recommend that you make the motion to table for the July meeting.
For a date or until something happens, and you can specify what.
Okay.
You can specify what until that is.
Okay. Let me restate that then. I make a motion that we table this until the July meeting and direct the zoning people to check into this as to why there are so many people opposed and why that was not considered in the first.
Do we have a second? No, we do not.
I'll second.
We have a second from Mr. Shirley. Now, can we discuss the motion? Any comments?
I guess I have a few comments. One being, I don't know the town Kinnickinnick's process, but do they? I'm guessing that they do not hold public hearing at that level. Is that correct?
So in terms of process for rezoning applications, Once the application is submitted to the county, we forward that application to the town. Now, some towns choose to make a recommendation, some do not. In terms of required public hearings, they are not required to have a public hearing as far as the town goes. We follow our statutory requirements. We're having a public hearing tonight. We have to give due notice, publication in the official paper, abutting property owners, 300 feet get noticed. But we don't really control what the town does in terms of their process. We can certainly request that of them, but they're not obligated to follow that request.
My other question to John also was changing this from R2 to AG2. In our zoomed in map on packet page 14, it looks like we're creating some kind of a spot zoning, but backing that image up a little bit more, maybe we're not, but I'm a little concerned with that as well.
I'm going to go last, so I want to make sure that everybody's had a chance to speak before I do. Do you have anything, Scott?
I think there was a question to John.
Yeah, it was a question to John.
Okay, John, I'm sorry.
So the question was, is there a concern about spot zoning? Spot zoning happens when a decision is made arbitrarily. In this case, in terms of a spot zoning, we reviewed actually 3 planning documents, all of which at least support a notion of a change of zone. So if it's supported by a long-range planning document, it is not considered spot zoning. Now, if our planning documents did not support that, I would be very concerned about spot zoning, but that's not the case here.
I mean, my thought, and I've had this discussion before, is not this committee's purview to really take into consideration why the request is being made. We just have to determine whether it's a valid request. Now, that being said, I understand the opposition to it. I am mostly, though, I guess a personal property guy. So, but I do understand the opposition, and I am in support of postponing it until the town maybe gets a little more input.
Just one other question for you in regards to this. When we have all the different zoning district types of zoning. Under this, it's currently a residential type. Is there a difference, unintended difference in some of the things that can happen when you do a conversion from the residential to the ag, like for instance, animal units and things like that? Again, this is a request that has to do because of a particular venue that they're trying to create. But once this change is made, these are definite changes that are attached to this property for the life of the property then. So my question for you, is there any unintended or things that can happen within the agricultural zoning that wouldn't necessarily be able to happen under the residential zoning?
So the Ag 2 district, which the applicant is seeking to gain, is pretty specific. Our agricultural entertainment activities are allowed in the Ag 1 and Ag 2 districts. Now, the challenge that we have as staff, when we made a recommendation tonight, we have 21 townships in St. Croix County, 17 of which are under county zoning. So whenever we get a rezoning request, we always go to the town comprehensive plan. Unfortunately, some plans have not been updated or amended as of late. And in the case of Kinnikinnick, the last plan update was 2008. So the challenge is trying to make a recommendation based on the current plan in effect, which in some towns are a little bit more dated than others. So does the 2008 plan still reflect, the desires of the town? So when you talk about consequences and things like that, that's just a challenge we have. But that's the most recent plan adopted, and that's what we need to use when we make a recommendation.
I think he was also asking if there are other uses that Ag 2 allows that might have a concern, because it is an ag district and we focus tonight on what the applicant's proposal is, but there could be other uses. And we'd have to, I think the better answer is we'd have to look at that and provide you with a copy of that information.
I can tell you generally, though, that our residential districts still allow a fair amount of agricultural uses. The difference in the ag and the residential districts is we cap the number of animal units that can take place in the residential districts. So in the case of this, if it's R2, you can still have a livestock facility, you just can't exceed 200 animal units. When you get into the ag districts, you can have a higher amount. So once you're in the ag district, you're allowed more agricultural use benefits. Whereas in the R2 district, that really begins to taper down. As Ellen mentioned, we do have a use table and our zoning code that we can provide for you at the next meeting for your information, if that helps a little bit.
I don't know if you'd be able to answer this or not, but this would be just, do you know offhand, with a change like that, like you said, you can have X amount of animal units in the residential, say somebody in the future, I know this isn't anything to do with this application, but say in the future somebody wants, say, a hog operation or something like that, how many animal units would we be looking at potential with that kind of a change variation?
So again, in the residential districts, livestock facilities in the R2 district are permitted. You're capped at 200 animal units, but you're allowed 1 animal unit per acre. So you would need to have a nutrient management plan or some kind of similar document that shows what you're doing with the waste. So if you have a smaller parcel, you have to have a plan on where, you're moving the sewage to.
So how many pigs could you put on that property?
What they're asking is, if it was Ag 2, how many animal units are there compared to 200 in R2? That's what they're asking you.
If a subsequent owner of that land decided to put pigs in that land, how many pigs could you put on that land?
Well, again, R2, you're capped. Agriculture, again, you're limited to 1 animal unit per acre. You still have to have a nutrient management plan to show what you're doing with that waste.
So John, there is no cap in A2.
No.
So there's no cap. So if they could line up additional land to deal with the animal waste, they could go above 200 animal units. And regardless of how many, an animal unit is generally considered about 1,200 pounds. But that's not the way we actually do it. It's related to a chart the state of Wisconsin provides us. But generally speaking, it's 1,200 pounds. So, yeah, a lot of pigs, or a lot of chickens, or a lot of cows. But I think your question is answered by saying it's more than 200.
If I can add one more thing, the livestock facility ordinance also requires pretty restrictive setbacks from road right-of-way and property lines, so that would be a limiting factor as well. Yep.
Any other thoughts? All right, then I would like to share my comments. When we, this committee, helped formulate this zoning code, and I was part of that group, what I envisioned was that these agricultural businesses would have the opportunity to make additional revenue from their businesses out in a rural community not recreate a rural community within a more urban center. I believe that a landowner should have the right to do with their property what they should, but I also believe that the zoning code is there and exists to protect a landowner to enjoy their property the way they expected to when they purchased it, which is to say that the property owners around this farm should have the right to enjoy their property the way they expected to when they purchased their land. And rezoning a property so that the people who own that property can change the way they enjoy their property may not be the same thing in the same category, which is why I support tabling this so that we can re-examine this. I don't know what opportunities we have to recreate the zoning law, to re-look at the 15 events, to re-look at what an event definition is. But all those things need to be discussed, and if we can do it in 1 month, or if we need to take 6 months, we need to do that. So I support tabling this. So having said that, is there any other comments? Then let's put tabling it to a vote. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Thank you.
Can I clarify then, Chairman, about what you'd like staff to do between now and July? So what information are you looking for so we can lay out what the next step would be? So do you want to review our ordinance? Is that what it is? Do you want to refer it back to the township for a second opinion?
Both. I would love the township to take a look at this.
If they would, we can definitely ask them to, I think.
That
Right.
would be excellent. The
Okay.
township, the town planning commission.
Sounds like we had more participation at our public hearing than the town did, so.
Right. And I would ask everybody who participated with this to go back to your town and share your thoughts with them in the same manner that you did here.
Okay. So at the June
Participation
meeting,
of
then, we'll have a discussion of our ordinance and what the rules are. We'll refer it back to the township to ask for a second opinion, and we'll plan on bringing it back at our July meeting.
Thank you.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That being said, we're going to move into public hearing number 2, which is rezoning of the town of Somerset, which is a residential one, changed to a commercial. Ellen? Right, John, we'll let the, yeah, why don't we take a 5-minute break? All right, thank you for your forbearance. We'll be back in order. We're going to open with public hearing for the rezoning of town of Somerset, and John Hilger will give the presentation.
Our second public hearing tonight is a rezoning application in the town of Somerset by Hideaway LLC, applicant Mike Campers. The Hideaway owns a total of 41 acres with access to 170th Avenue in the town of Somerset. We'll get to the maps in just a moment. The applicant is desiring to rezone the 41-acre parcel from R1 residential and C1 commercial to the C3 commercial district. And I'll show you a map in just a second. We have two different zoning districts here. The applicant states that the rezoning is necessary after the St. Croix County Board of Adjustment revoked two conditional use permits issued in 1984 and 91 for existing uses on the property. The Board of Adjustment revoked the prior approvals in the fall of last year due to noncompliance with conditions of the permits. Uses that were allowed under the prior conditional use permits included an Apple River tubing operation, 2 outdoor open-air concerts per year, a food concession eatery, and a campground. Again, taking a look at some of the location maps, you see the parcel highlighted in red. We have the village of Somerset in the upper left corner to the northwest. We have the Highway 64 with the main interchange into Somerset at this location. And then, as I mentioned earlier, the access for this parcel is off of 170th Avenue. You see the Apple River winding its way through the area, and everything you see in green is within the village of Somerset, and everything in white is within the town of Somerset. Just a kind of a broader aerial view. You see the layout of the landscape, the Apple River winding through town, the railway coming through here, 170th Avenue, going east-west, largely rural agricultural to the south, and of course the village to the north. Taking a little bit more in-depth look, you can kind of see the layout of the campground area. The structure you see in the very northeast corner where the cursor is was the eatery concession stand that was approved as part of the prior conditional use permit. And then again, the access down to 170th Street. General features of the property, you see an existing zoning map down below. The parcel is highlighted in the lighter yellow, which is the R1 district. And the area you see in the pinkish color is the C1 commercial district. And again, the applicant is desiring to rezone the 41 acres to the C3 commercial district. The parcels are primarily bounded by R2 residential that we talked about at the last hearing, in the east, west, and south directions. And to the north, this area in white is property within the jurisdiction of the village of Somerset. And the village has a comprehensive land use plan, and what their land use plan is projecting for this area is for an interchange mixed use, which would include mixed use, future high density residential, and highway commercial uses. Again, when we review rezonings, to be consistent with statute, we need to take a look at the comprehensive plans of the jurisdictions involved. So we're going to take a look at the town of Somerset plan. As we mentioned earlier, the comp plan provides that future vision for the jurisdiction. They identify policies, objectives, and maps onto how they view their property and area within their jurisdiction developing. So the map you see below is the town of Somerset planned land use map from their 2015 to 2035 comprehensive plan. The blue point of the arrow, it designates this parcel as commercial. The town of Somerset has quite an extensive list of comprehensive plan language summary. I'll just summarize by saying that the commercial classification identifies existing non-residential properties within the town of Somerset that are assessed commercial. And that is the case with the Hideaway LLC property. The town also goes on to state that the planned land use map should be used as a guide and should not take precedence over the goals and objectives. They also indicate that property should be used and maintained in a manner that does not pose health or safety issues, and that the planned land use map is not intended to be a rigid end product document. So it's implying that the town has some flexibility when they interpret their land use map. When we talk about transportation policies, it talks about adequate off-street parking for any development, which would be reviewed during this project if it proceeds. Economic development policies talk about commercial and light industrial development occurring in a manner that is compatible with the rural character and does not over-commercialize the town's resources. Business growth should not significantly increase noise or traffic, odors or lighting. And general areas suitable for commercial light industrial development will be identified in the planned land use map, which they did. Next, we take a look at the county comprehensive future land use map. And like the town's plan, we identify in the future land use plan for the county a commercial designation for this property. What the county indicates is that the primary intent of this designation is to identify areas suitable for planned commercial development. Policies in the county plan also talk about trying to match to the extent possible the maps of local towns, of course, with towns having their own comprehensive plans, to try and make the process seamless. When the town updates their comp plan, the county will try and match that with our comp plan as well when we are in the process of updating ours right now. Taking a look at some natural resource features, most of the property is within an environmental corridor and primarily corresponds to the Apple River along the edge of the north and west property line. And again, as we discussed at the prior hearing, an environmental corridor includes a number of sensitive natural resource features, including rivers, streams, steep slopes, etc. We're taking a look now at the shoreland, wetlands, and floodplain areas on the property. Because of its proximity to the Apple River, the parcel does include shoreland areas, which again is within 300 feet of a stream, floodplain and wetland areas. And again, the shoreland areas are regulated through Chapter 16 of our code. So if there's any impact or intent to take a look at developing in that area, we do have standards that we would enforce that have been approved by the DNR. Floodplain areas are also regulated through Chapter 18. There are some floodplain areas on the property that will have to be reviewed for any future development on the property. And then lastly, there appears to be some limiting soil on the site for private on-site sewage systems on the very east edge of the property. The site itself is relatively flat because of the Apple River Plateau, but as you go just to the east, there is some rise in elevation from an 830 elevation to a 915. So there are some steep slopes in the area, but these are just adjacent to and off of the east edge of the property. And again, this map just kind of gives you a different perspective. The area that you see that is in the green area here with some of the access roads, that is the subject property. The white lines you see are 10-foot contours, 10-foot intervals. So you can see the elevation of the land just to the east of the property go up here about 85 feet. Just to give you a description of the layout for the property. Governmental agency review, because of its proximity to the Apple River, the DNR was sent a notice regarding the rezoning application. And much like the Lawrence rezoning that preceded this hearing, the DNR simply points out that there will be shoreland and floodplain regulations that will be in effect when a development proposal comes through for this property. The Town of Somerset Plan Commission, now we go to the local jurisdiction review. The Town of Somerset Plan Commission recommended approval of the rezoning request on April 19th, and the Town Board of Somerset recommended approval on May 3rd, 2023. And both the recommendations were similar, or the same between the Plan Commission and Council. The recommendations for rezoning approval were modified from the original application request. So what the town is recommending is that the former concession eatery, the 4.7 acre parcel at the very northeast corner of the property that's currently zoned C1, would be rezoned to C3. The remaining 37 acres would retain the current R1 residential zoning district designation. And within your packet, we attached those minutes. The applicant was in agreement with this recommendation based on verbal comments provided at the town meetings. And then as staff, we wanted to clarify that just so there was no misunderstanding. So we did send an email to the applicant and their counsel, making sure that there was understanding that that was in fact the recommendation and that they were in understanding of that. And then this next page just shows the resulting zoning map. So you see the 4.7 acres in the very upper corner. That would be rezoned from C1 to C3. The parcel shown here with the light yellow would retain its R1 residential status. And so maybe asking why the C1 to C3, what we're showing below is the rezoning. If it's approved ultimately by the county board, below we show a zoning approval matrix. So once and if the rezoning gets approved, the applicant would have to follow the processes below. And as you can see, the public campground portion would be a conditional use permit in the R1 residential. The river tubing operation would be a conditional use permit in either the R1 or C3. The outdoor entertainment, the 2 concerts per year that they had under the prior approval, would be a conditional use permit in the C3 district. And then the eatery restaurant would be a permitted use in the C3 district. And again, the conditional use permit process is a review by the Board of Adjustment, which requires a public hearing where conditions may or not be required. So again, following the rezoning, there are a number of different approvals the applicant would need to go through. So the rezoning is the first step in that process. In terms of findings, when staff reviewed this, the town of Somerset recommendations for rezoning, again, were modified. We just want to clarify. The town recommends the former eatery parcel at 4.7 acres be rezoned to C3. The remaining 37 acres will continue to be R1, consistent with the town recommendations and the applicant's agreement and understanding. Existing language in the town of Somerset comp plan states that the planned land use map should be used as a guide for land use decision making, but does not take a precedence over the goals and objectives. So there seems to be some concurrence or understanding between the town and the applicant. So even though not all of the property is going to be rezoned to C3, the comp plan does allow flexibility in allowing where that line is drawn. And again, the planned land use map is not intended to be a rigid document. The modified recommendation of the town board is consistent with the town of Somerset planned land use map. Development of the property should be consistent and not in conflict with the St. Croix County Natural Resource Plan. We just kind of covered some of the highlights of that. Ultimate development of the property will need to comply with sanitary, zoning, shoreline, and floodplain ordinance provisions. In terms of applicable criteria for tonight, the Community Development Committee shall only recommend approval subject to the Town of Somerset and County Comprehensive Plan being consistent with the request, consistency with our Natural Resource Management Plan, and that the rezoning and proposed use is consistent with the St. Croix County zoning ordinance, that the town has not disapproved the rezoning request, and that the rezoning and proposed use is consistent with abutting districts and does not result in spot zoning, which is not the case here. It does not result in spot zoning. Again, options for the committee tonight would be to recommend approval, recommend disapproval, or table for discussion or additional information. Based on review of the documents and the town and applicant discussion during the town review process, staff is recommending approval of the request with consistency to the town and county comprehensive plan maps. that the northeasterly 4.7 acres be zoned to C3, and that the balance of the property remains zoned R1 residential. And again, the Town Board of Somerset has recommended approval of the scenario I just described, and that the proposed use can be consistent and comply with Chapter 15 zoning. We did receive a comment that we did include in the packet for you tonight, just so the committee is aware of that. And that concludes the overview of this application.
Thank you, John. Excellent. At this moment, I would ask if anybody from the public would like to speak in favor of this rezoning. And if you do, that you sign the sheet so we know who you are and have a legal record of that. You're welcome to come up to the microphone and say your piece. Would anybody like to speak in favor of this rezoning? Have you signed in, sir?
Yes.
Thank you very much.
I'm Jamie Johnson, and I'm counsel for Mike Cappers and the Hideaway. Our firm is the one that submitted the application. I don't really have a whole lot to add. I think that the department did a good job in reviewing the situation. I do just a little history because it's important. This is not going to be any kind of new development or anything like that. This is consistent with the way that this property has been used for over 3 decades. The conditional use permits were granted in 84 and 91, and obviously we're here because those conditional use permits were revoked by the Board of Adjustment last fall. All right. Now, in reviewing this matter, because our firm didn't get involved until very late January, early February, so we submitted the application in March for this rezoning first, and now there are applications pending for conditional use permits, but there's going to be a lot of work that needs to be done because the maps need to be updated and so forth. But it would be our position that this property, the 4.7 acres, and I don't know how to, I guess that's this area here, all right? That was zoned commercial without conditions in 2010. And I've got, town board minutes and this committee's minutes going back in 2010 because Mr. Cappers, when he came into the scene and was going to buy the campground from the prior owner, applied for an alcohol permit and so forth, and then there was a question about, well, does there need to be a conditional use permit for this? And it went back to the zoning department. It was before it was called community development, but anyway, the zoning folks looked at it, and there was only one designation then, just commercial. And there had been actually, in the original zoning of it back in 83, I think is when it was rezoned the first time, it had conditions, and one of those conditions was no alcohol sale. Well, alcohol was being sold there for 2 decades prior to Mr. Cappers coming on, and then when this was brought to the zoning department's attention, they said, okay, they didn't have a C1, C2, C3 designation in 2010, so they just made it commercial without conditions. And it wasn't until, I think this committee then refined the ordinances for the zoning and so forth and created the C3. It would be our position that the C3 is what it should have been designated. Once the C1, 2, 3 was created, it should have been C3 back in 2018 moving forward, but it wasn't. So it's currently C1, so that's why we're asking it to be C3. And the matrix was put up there for permitted uses. Again, the uses we're looking to use are just consistent with the way that it's been used. At the level, the Planning Commission for the town of Somerset recommended it, as did the town board. At the public hearing before the Planning Commission, there were comments in favor, more in favor than against. The adjoining landowners have all been notified of this, and they've either come to meetings or sent emails in support, with the exception of one, and that would be, I think this gentleman is here tonight, and he owns property that's on the other side of the river, and that's this property that on that other map is going to be used as highway commercial or high density, so forth. But nonetheless, I've been there to this property. It's a perfect spot for a campground, and that's the way that we intend to, my client intends to use it. So we would just ask that the recommendation of the department be adopted by this committee. And then we'll be back here, whether it's in 2 months or whatever, for the conditional use permits.
Thank you, sir.
If there's any questions or anything like that, would I have an opportunity? Could I reserve like a short rebuttal if there are any comments
It's
against?
not how it works.
Okay.
If
Well, then I'm just going to say, because in all candor, when we were at the town board, it was not a 5-0 vote. It was a split 3-2 vote. I see a couple of town board members here that weren't in favor of it. And they had concerns about, well, you're going to rezone it to C3. What other things are you going to, could it be used for? Whether it was Mr. Capper's or somebody Mr. Capper sold it for. And the examples that I saw under permitted uses in C3 were senior living apartments, a nursing home, and veterinary clinic would be 3 of the top. And I don't know how any of those would really fit for the use of this property, the access and so forth. That this has been used as a campground, and it hasn't generated any significant public safety concerns over the years. The only reason the conditional use permits were revoked, it was an issue on the noise and this definition of concert events. And there is no intent here to go back to the days of Ozfest when they would bring in 2,000-3,000 kids from Minnesota and so forth. That's not going to happen, and it hasn't happened since Mr. Cappers has owned it. The purpose of the entertainment, which will be, like I said, that's been applied for, that's to entertain the folks and bring them to the campground to have a fun weekend. That's what it's going to be used for. But anyway, I think I'm anticipating what the negative comments might be, but this is consistent with other tubing and camping operations that are in close proximity. You got River's Edge, it's just up the river, and you got Float Right, which is very nearby in the village. So really there is nothing inconsistent about using this property the way it's been used for the last 4 decades. All right, thank you.
Thank you, sir. Would anybody else like to speak in favor of this rezoning? Kind of step up the microphone. Have you signed the? Yeah. Okay, thank you.
I actually live right here, have for 12 years, and never actually met this man, even though I kind of keep to myself. So, but I haven't really had, there's some noise and stuff like that on the weekends, but I've really had no problem with drunk people, people coming up my driveway, extra crime, kind of like they were talking about with other things. The man bought this property knowing it was a campground, and, I think it should just stay that way, to tell you the truth. I don't know everything about it. This is the first time I have ever come to one of these meetings. I guess I need to get more involved in them or something like that. I don't understand all the different zonings and stuff like that, but, that's far away where they're rezoning that commercial part of it. And like I said, I've lived there 12 years. It hasn't kept me up at night. I enjoy the fireworks. When they light them off, I'll go outside and stuff to see if I can see them. Like I said, I haven't had any disruptive people or crime or, any sort of problems from the camp goers. And personally, I think we're passed out of the township. I moved out in the country to be out in the country, but this also brings business into Somerset, of course, and Somerset's a little town, needs some business. I like that we have a Dairy Queen and it's open, and I think it's open all year round finally, where before it would shut down during the winter. We got a couple pizzerias, stuff like that, and being able to cruise into town and get some fast food and different things that this campground, the people that come to it, help support and contribute to the town for income, I'm all for it. And like I said, 12 years, had no issues. Like I said, never met the man. Nice to meet you, by the way. And I heard this was going on. I missed the one last year and stuff like that, so I don't understand 100%. I heard some people complained about the noise for revoking it, but, you know, during the summer, if you got your windows closed and you're running your air conditioning, you know, some people worry about the train there too. And I enjoy the train. I lots of times go out on my deck to watch it go by. So, you know, I'm for it. And so, thank you guys for letting me speak. Sorry, like I said, first time being at one of these things. And
it's good to see you. Thank you for coming.
Yep, thank you.
Thank you. Would anybody else like to speak in favor of the rezoning? I'll ask one more time. Would anybody else like to speak in favor of the rezoning? Very good. Would anybody like to speak in opposition to this rezoning? I'll invite anybody to speak in opposition to the rezoning. Going, gone. One more time. Anybody like to speak in opposition to the rezoning? That being the case, I will close this public hearing, and we'll move on to business item number 2, amending the comprehensive zoning ordinance, section 2, township 30N, range 19W, town of Somerset, rezoning 4.7 acres from the C1 commercial zoning district to the C3 commercial zoning district, and I would entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion and rezone 4.7 acres from C1 commercial to C3 commercial in the town of Somerset.
Very good. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
We got a second. Conversation? Thoughts?
Question. Okay. Seen in the reports that went through, and we've went through the process for the town of Somerset, and of course the county reviews. Is there, this is just a question, but is there any jurisdictional control with like extraterritorial plat review authority for the village that should be addressed, or are they okay with everything?
I am not sure if extraterritorial plat review would apply to this. I don't believe it's a plat. It's an existing lot. Yep. I do not believe it would apply.
Any other questions? Very good. We'll put it to a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed, same sign. Passes unanimously. Thank you very much. Moving on to business item number 3, introduction of Dr. Carrie Weiss, Area 5 Extension Director. It's so good to see you.
Thank you. Although I appreciate the time and the opportunity to speak about extension, I will be brief. I will just say this, that I come to this position as area director with a variety of K-12 experience, both in the classroom and then in school administration, as well as dual experience in the reserves, where I served as an MP and in intelligence. So I do have a variety of background in leadership, per se, as well as just prior to this, I was St. Croix and Polk County's community development organizational and leadership programmer. So I have a lot of work that I've done with people at the table here as well. I am a local, and so this is kind of a homecoming for me by way of Madison and Rochester to come back to this position. I will say this, my biggest task probably is to work at helping people understand the reorganization where we were once very county model and now more state, which just means that we are bringing you a lot of resources from the University of Wisconsin-Madison, a lot of specialists, a lot of various tools and strategies to continue, though, with our relationship building that we do with our local educators. And so, again, if you have questions about that, or if you have needs that Extension might be able to support, please feel free to reach out. And again, thank you for the time.
Thanks for coming, and I'm sorry it's such a long meeting so far. It's really nice to meet you. And we'll have you back for specific reports if you'd like to come back and bring donuts or something. All right. We're going to ask for an update on the Wildwood Trail, and I guess Ellen Denzer and Heather Amos are going to have at it. Who's going first?
Ken is.
Oh, well, I'm sorry, my notes said otherwise, so we'll invite Ken to speak.
Yeah. So, as Mr. Peavy had mentioned, we've met a couple of times and talked, and I think we have a lot of agreement on the types of uses that the adjacent property owners have enjoyed over the years, being able to cross the trail and whatnot. And while I know there were some enforcement actions a year or a couple of years ago on that, I think those issues have been resolved. And we're working towards reaching basically a written agreement to memorialize what those rights of the adjacent property owners are, so we can avoid any conflict in the future over that. So I don't think there's any disagreement about, we have the same goal at the end. I think the only difference we have right now is the format of the agreement. And so that really comes down to an ownership question. So are they giving us an easement or are we giving them an easement? And it determines who owns it. So St. Croix County has thought we've owned it for 50-some years now. So I'm taking the position that we own it and we would give them an easement. So that's really the bottom line right now. The last thing that needs to be ironed out is the format of the agreement, but really no dispute over the rights of the adjacent property owners.
We have questions for the administrator? No. All right, are we getting an opinion from our council or not?
I have worked with Administrator Witt and the adjacent property owners, and they've proposed an agreement to us. We've proposed an agreement to them. And I think what this committee needs to decide is, do we bring those agreements to the committee to determine what should happen next, or do Administrator Witt and I continue to have conversations with the adjacent property owners to determine if we can come to some type of an agreement to present together to this committee?
Mr. Administrator, are you asking for guidance?
Well, if you have any guidance, I'll be willing to take it. Otherwise, I'll just keep working towards it in a deal.
I have an opinion, but I'll ask the committee. What do you think?
I attended a meeting at the O'Galley Town Hall with the group, some of which are with us tonight, and I had the feeling that they would like things to move along a little swifter than they have, and so that would be my encouragement, Ken and Heather, to get on it. Okay. Because it's been 2.5 years, I think someone mentioned, isn't it? And that's a long time. Some marriages don't last that long. So I think we have to get this under control a bit more. That's my mind.
That's good advice. I'm going to jump on that. Anybody else?
The only comment that I really have is that I know that you've met with some of the property owners, and I just want to make sure that we're extending this agreement to all the property owners, not just the some that you've met with.
Correct, yeah. While we only have met with a few that have, sort of volunteered to be the representatives, we're not making individual deals. I mean, whatever our policy is, it's applicable for everyone that lives along that trail.
The gentleman who said that he wanted us to return to having a respectful and community relationship, and I don't remember the exact phrase that he used, but it struck me. I've ridden the Wildwood Trail several times on a bicycle, and it beat me up. It almost defeated me. Yeah, I ride a steel bike, but I really have a lot of respect for the landowners along there. I met a couple of them. Mr. Peavy is a mentor of mine when I was on the county board, and I have nothing but respect and admiration for that gentleman. And I would like to see this wrapped up and to return to mutual respect and cooperation with these property owners just as soon as we can. So that's my counsel. There you have it. Any other thoughts, and we can move on? Sir.
Ken and Heather, could I ask you a question? The next item on the agenda is authorizing a driveway crossing the Wildwood. Are we in any position to do that? Do we know who owns the land, or is that?
That's our next agenda.
Well, I just wanted their opinion right now, if it is or not. It would depend on how we would treat the next resolution.
I think we'll move on to agenda item number 5. And we'll open it with that question.
It is the opinion of the county that we own the Wildwood Trail. And so this resolution authorizing driveway crossing on the Wildwood Trail is a request from one of the adjacent property owners to build a driveway across the Wildwood Trail. And in order to do so, this committee and the county board would have to approve that because it is a driveway across what I am characterizing as county property, the Wildwood Trail. And so the agreement that's in your packet and the resolution is the proposal, and the agreement does indicate that the adjacent property owner, Mr. Turnahoy, owns an adjacent property, and that he is requesting to have a driveway over county property, specifically the Wildwood Trail. And so there are some provisions that I think you will hear some comments on that from the Parks Administrator, and I think maybe a request to modify one of the provisions in the agreement from the adjacent property owner, but that is my opinion.
And if I'm to understand this correctly, our previous corporate counsel had similar or same opinion?
Correct. I have minutes going back to planning and zoning committees from 2000 through 2003. There was a similar request from an adjacent property owner to have a driveway across the Wildwood Trail. It was the opinion of Corporation Counsel Greg Timmerman at that time that the county owned the property, and if we did not own the property, that we had a strong argument for adverse possession. At that time, Planning and Zoning Committee did not approve the driveway request over the Wildwood Trail. And so we are bringing this new request from a new adjacent property owner to this committee to see what your opinion is on whether to approve this request for a driveway. And again, I think the Parks Administrator has some comments he would like to make if the committee would like to call on him, and then possibly in this committee's opinion whether or not I can just present the possible change to the agreement from the adjacent property owner.
Right, and I understand that Mr. Chernohoy would also like to say a couple of words, but let's call on JR first.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, committee members. So JR Ballard again as the park administrator. So just a couple of items just to think about, to discuss with this current resolution authorizing a driveway across the Wildwood Trail at that 460 250th Street in O'Galley. From the park's perspective, a driveway crossing the Wildwood Trail would not align with our goals and objectives of the county's outdoor recreation policy at this time. It would Goal 1 and Objective 3 would be safety of the trail users. It could potentially cause a risk to our trail users. Goal 4, Objective 9, it's the long-term expense. So currently the trail uses 3/8-inch limestone for the actual trail surface. If there was a driveway and vehicle traffic on a consistent basis, it would likely wash out our trail and compact that limestone. So therefore we would have to do increased maintenance on the trail at that location. There's currently more than 15 land parcels along the trail that are or could be landlocked in the future, increasing the likelihood of additional crossings along the 7 miles of the trail. So we could do, if we did one now, we would likely set a precedence for more than 15 more along the 7 miles. The local snowmobile club has put funds towards this trail. As the park administrator, we should give them their opportunity to probably speak on this matter, since they do use the trail in the winter for snowmobiling. Finally, if the county were to grant access, it's Parks' recommendation that we limit that to seasonal farm access, just to minimize the number of times that somebody would drive perpendicular over the trail, causing, like I said before, issues with maintenance and our staff's time. So, as the park administrator, as this resolution is currently written, it's not in the best interest of the St. Croix County Parks and should be reviewed in greater detail.
All right, we don't have a motion. Let's just talk about this before we do. Who wants to go first? Scott.
So, over the past, how many years has this been being used by the adjacent landowners that have property on both sides? And if we are denying any permits ever to cross this trail, how many parcels are we landlocking that have currently always had access across it until we decided to do this enforcement action?
Yeah, so that's not what the situation is here. And so the Turnahoy's parcel always was a landlocked parcel. They had a separate access from a different parcel who has revoked that access. And so they're looking for a new way to access their property. So this wasn't related at all to any enforcement issues. This is separate from the Wildwood Trail update, really. So, does that clarify that for you? Okay.
I just have a question. Is this going to be a driveway? There's going to be a house on one side of the trail and land on the other side. Is this going to be accessed every day, multiple times a day, as in a residential driveway, or what is this going to be used for?
I think that's one of the questions that you can ask of the applicant, what their future intention is. That would be one of the things that you could place a limitation on. As JR had mentioned, you could make it just an agricultural access, which would restrict it from being able to build a house. But I would defer to the applicants of what their future plans are for it.
Mr. Turnahoy, would you mind coming up to the microphone and let's have a chat? How are you, sir?
I'm very much regretting not eating before coming here tonight.
Thanks for coming up. Tell us about the property, what your hope is, and relax. It's cool.
Okay, appreciate that. Yes, so I'm John Chernahoy. My father and I purchased this parcel out in the Oak Alley area. It's a 60-acre piece. It's truly the back 40 of it. To the far western edge of the property is wooded, and then the front 20 is forever been agriculture use. We purchased the land last fall and had kind of just a grandfathered in access through our neighbor to the south. There's already a natural opening that's been used as long as any of my neighbors can attest for a long time. So the sense of urgency in which we bring this request to the committee today is first and foremost the agriculture access of our land. The farmer that was leasing it last year has decided to turn us away the 20 acres. That kind of limits some of the income that can and also benefit from a tax point of view. So that's the obvious first goal of ours, is just to retrieve a new access point so we can maintain 20 acres of tillable land to be leased to a local farmer. And then secondarily, I think I would just comment on kind of the greater cultural scenario of the back and forth between the county's assumed rights on the trail, and then the landowner's understanding of their rights on the trail. I think this is a good example of, we have a CSM dated 2002 that has easement that goes across a vacant egg field and perpendicularly crosses the Wildwood Trail. I've invited various county administration out to look at the crossing. It is a low-risk area. It's very straight in both directions. There's no winding corners or turns. And then in addition, it's one of the flattest parts of the trail as well. So in terms of that safety concern, I think you'd have to come and see it first. You know, our easement on the CSM is a 66-foot wide easement. That's not what we're interested in doing. I know you heard from the wedding venue, you approve it once and that can change. But I've also gone so far as to purchase land on this side of the trail as well. So I now own a 3-acre parcel, and then immediately above the 3-acre parcel is the easement, and then it goes back in to the 60. And so now there's kind of this scenario where we still want to work with the county. If they find that our easement crossing is not appropriate, we have another 100+ feet stretch that may be more of an efficient crossing to entertain. And then going back to the cultural comment, I think this would just be a nice, good faith gesture that signals, after years of frustration and increased hostility from landowners coexisting and cooperating with this recreational trail. Instead of it being seen as, well, if we allow the Chernohoys to gain access to their land, how many others are going to come? I think it's more just a timing thing of whatever rights we can get through that access today starts to build a better rapport between the county and the landowners in the area. For whatever reason, I became a spokesperson with all these landowners. Tim Ramberg and Jerry were at our local landowner forum, so to speak, and we've had 3 of those, and each time they just get more and more hostile. These people are wanting answers. They live here, they look out their windows and look at this trail. And to make one shameless plug on the trail, from what I've learned through this whole process with landowners, everyone wants the trail to continually exist. It's just a matter of ownership. And as you could understand, rightfully so, the people that live there and see this land are the ones that are more passionate about the ownership claim, and therefore we're back at an impasse of how to move forward, like Ken suggested earlier. But I'll pause there. Thanks. Thank you.
I have any questions for Mr. Chernohoy? Jerry?
I didn't hear my question answered. You mentioned, John, that for now it's ag access. The for now part is the part that I question.
Of course.
Please answer.
Yep, so in the agreement that Ken drafted, it had language of unrestricted access via the 66-foot wide easement that we have that immediately addresses the trail. Certainly my goal is to get a farmer in there this year, and I've contacted local excavators. I've learned too much about culvert lengths and this and that. I just need 20 feet to garner agriculture equipment access across the trail. And it's, I know there's an expense risk to the county, but based on my excavating estimate on this whole project, I'm sure another $1,000 to make sure that the trail has the right limestone on it is an easy thing for us to work with. So, but I'd be lying to say to you that I'm 31 years old. I want to own this land for a long time. Would the possibility of being able to build an accessory building or perhaps a home on the 60 acres later in life would be of interest to me? Of course it would. Absolutely.
I have a concern. Something that the landowners along this trail have done over in the past, over a long period of time, is if they cross with a piece of ag equipment and tear it up a bit, they've repaired it. Nobody tends to know about it. It's just done. Are you in a position where if one of your tenants tears up the trail, can you hold them accountable and ask them to put some gravel down and compact it a bit and move on? And is that something that, because one of the concerns that Mr. Ballard had was that if this trail gets damaged just a little, that it gets repaired. And that's part of a congenial relationship, is that we maintain the trail. Is that something you can hold up your part of the deal on?
The assumption that I'd be following there is the easement that Ken and Heather have proposed for all adjacent landowners to cross the trail from one side to the other has very clear language that says maintain the trail's integrity. So assuming that perhaps we do come to an agreement with the county and all of my neighbors, that's rule number one on all paperwork that we've been working on is kind of a shared responsibility for trail integrity. And Bill Peavy, I'm sure I could call him at any point in time and he would be willing to help me repair whatever ruts were left in the trail, so long as he's around with us.
Oh, sure, put Bill on the spot. Okay. Any other questions? One more, Jerry. I mean, as many as you want, Jerry.
Okay. So, John, did I hear you say that you would be happy with a limited easement? In that I mean for that, an agricultural crossing, as Bill has some, to go back and forth, and other landowners. I guess that makes a big difference between that and I want a asphalt driveway for my car and my truck and my boat to pass over.
Yeah, of course. I mean, as it stands today, the agreement that you have in front of you suggests an unrestricted access, but in terms of the time sensitivity of what I need to achieve to maintain an ag lease, some sort of limited access would work for me today.
Sean, or Ryan, I'm sorry, whoever I saw a hand.
My concern with this goes back to, since we've always started talking about Wildwood, is again where the ownership lines are drawn and coming up with an agreement for a access point or an easement through there. I would like to see some kind of verbiage in that agreement saying that at this time the county believes that we are ownership, but if we are not, then that has to be retractionary.
I think if we make an agreement, we're assuming that the county owns the property. But it couldn't hurt to just say it. Heather?
Correct. So the statement in the agreement right now indicates the county owns a recreational trail known as the Wildwood Trail. That was purposeful that I stated it that way. But what I'm understanding from Supervisor Shirley is that you would like some language in there that indicates that if there is a court determination or some other determination otherwise that the county does not own the trail, that this agreement would be void?
Yes. Okay. Or unnecessary.
I also would not want to, in terms of limiting this, I don't want to preclude Mr. Chernohoy from being able to build an accessory building or a home in years to come. That's not the intention of saying. When I'm thinking of limiting this, I would just not want to put any kind of pavement across the trail. Because of erosion, that may create a lip or an edge that somebody riding a bicycle or a snowmobile may catch. That would then cause a safety issue to me. I think we need to keep this limestone compacted, and that's what it is. It's a trail. So you're going to cross it, you cross it, but you're not going to pave it. That would be the limitation that I would pretty much feel that we need to keep. Any other thoughts?
So you're proposing an amendment to this resolution that said that on line 10, I guess, or 9 and 10 were to build an unpaved, add the word unpaved and unpaved driveway or private road instead of just.
Sean, I couldn't have said that better. I propose, would you, Sean, would you just make that amendment? I think.
Yeah,
amendment's
I'll
better
make a
than
motion.
Well, I
We
don't
can-
think there's a motion
Oh,
yet.
sorry.
on the floor.
all
I'll
right,
make the
okay.
motion to start with.
Please make it a motion, and could you, let's just make the motion with that as an amendment.
Okay,
And
I'll
just-
make an
We can do
motion.
this informally.
To approve the driveway with the amendment that on line 9 and 10, we change it to read, requested that St. Croix County allow him to build an unpaved driveway or private road, etc.
Do we have a second?
Yeah.
I'd second it.
Okay, so, second by Jerry, all right. Any more conversation?
You can have the.
Yeah. The request was for 66 feet. Is the 60, the deal is with, once you go to 66 feet, that's a town road standard? Was there a reason you wanted for 66, or typically for driveway is normally 33, from my experience anyway?
Yeah, and I think all he asked for was 20 feet for, farm access. We had talked about that before too. One of the clarifications you could put if you want to amend the current motion on the floor would be to say a 20-foot driveway within the 66-foot wide easement.
Well, I
Or a
want
33-foot easement with a 20-foot driveway.
let's ask somebody who actually uses agricultural equipment. Bill, how wide do you need this thing to be to get stuff through there?
20 foot isn't enough. We just took Gates down my place today, we got 23 feet to get our disc through. So we gotta have 25 feet to get the four-wheel drive tractor disc through. And if I may comment, the town of Galley's driveway ordinance. It wouldn't apply back there, but I don't know if it applies the right way, but that is our requirement.
Well, if he's
The crossing wouldn't have to be that wide, but I would say 20 feet would be tight.
well, if he's going to have, he's going to rent this land to an agricultural business, and they're going to have agricultural equipment crossing this trail. We need to allow him to have a driveway easement that's going to be wide enough to get a cutter head through there.
I
How,
don't want to, I'm not,
I'm just asking, Bill, what's the width of a cutter head?
well, yeah, our bead has 30 feet.
I would like to amend this to be 30, how wide? 35 feet. Let's just have a friendly amendment, we make it 35 feet.
Are you making the easement 35 feet or the driveway 35 feet?
I think you want to amend line 14.
Does the easement have to be 66? For the township. Let's just leave it the way it is. No?
I think we should drop that to an easement of 36 feet instead of 66.
36, are we agreed?
Instead, drop the easement or the driveway.
The easement.
If you change lines 14, you still have the minimum driveway for the township, or the minimum easement for the township, but you're restricting the width of the driveway still.
Really, I'm not restricting the width of the driveway. He could make that 36 feet wide if he wanted to.
Yeah, the easement is the land coming into it. The driveway width is how wide the driveway is that crosses the trail.
Right.
So that's the number or that you want to put a cap on if you do, is that driveway
On line 14,
width.
correct.
Yeah.
So, what number are we agreed to here? I just want to clarify that.
35, I think, was the discussion.
35,
For
line 14.
Line 14, yep.
All right, so we've got a gravel driveway at 35 feet. All right, so it's moved and seconded. And Jerry, comment?
One question about that, though. This farm machinery goes on the road, that has a 12-foot roadway. So 36 feet, 35 feet seems pretty wide. But Bill knows.
Oh, JR,
Yeah,
give
hand
him a
him.
microphone, JR. Just bring it to him. Okay.
Now I'm stuck in between. Yeah, so the state law allows you to go unlimited width between fields. So where I live, in my fields, I can go 30 feet from field to field to field. I couldn't rent John's this year because I couldn't get in there. But I rent the land across the street so I could have my 30-foot head on across the street, and I would not have to take it off to cross into John's. So Jerry's right, you can't go down the road with over 12 feet. Well, I think, but if you're going from field to field to field, and Barry would have been doing the same thing that rented it before, you can. So that helped clarify that at all, Jerry?
Yeah, it does. Thank you, Bill.
Yep.
So this agreement is going to make his land. Sorry about that. Bill, I want to ask you this question.
Uh-oh.
Keep that thing for a second. This agreement is going to make his land in the marketplace more saleable. Is that correct?
Much more usable, yes.
All right.
Yep.
Thank you.
Because he
Farmer.
had to find somebody if this year that only had a four-row corn planter to get in there.
All right. Thank you, Farmer Peavy.
Yep.
All right.
So they're not going to pave, 35 feet wide or gravel 35-foot wide driveway. I think the paved portion will be less than that. But think about any trees, and I don't know, I haven't been out there, John, but think about any trees that have to be cut down. So are you clear cutting 35-foot wide paths you can drive across then?
It's an agriculture easement. They got to get a 30-foot wide cutter head through there. That's what our intention is, to make it usable for agriculture. So we have a motion. Do we have a discussion on this? Brian?
I would still like that added in about the retractionary portion of the agreement.
So my only thought on that, Ryan, would be you're actually inviting litigation in order to free up the use of that property by putting it right in there that way. This property is pretty clearly, if you looked at the map that the department staff had put together, this property is pretty clearly owned by the county. I don't really think there's any question. There's really only 3 or 4 parcels along the whole trail that have any type of reversionary clause.
I guess to me that's arguable, but
Yeah, Ryan, I'm going to, if you don't mind, I'm just going to offer this, that if corporate counsel and the administrator are asking for that leeway, I'm inclined to just give it to them. But if you really want that, we could put it to a vote.
just to clarify then, if we're going to keep it the way it is, if we are found that we actually don't own the land that the trail sits on, then this agreement will be null and void either way, correct?
It may be. That's a lawyer answer.
We'll have to renegotiate everything if that turns out to be the case.
And I would ask, if the committee approves this resolution with the 2 modifications, that you would allow Administrator Witt and myself to modify the agreement to reflect the resolution, plus to specifically point out the current easement that is showing on your screen, so that the adjacent landowner knows where that crossing would be. It would be right in the agreement. So if that is something that this committee would be okay with, once you make the modifications to the resolution, then we can clarify some of those things that need to be, cleaned up in the agreement, I guess.
Yes.
No objections, is that right? Are we good? I see nodding, thumbs, good? All right. Any other discussion?
Just to clarify, are we changing line 14 then to a 35-foot?
We are.
Okay, just clarify that.
We are, and we're changing, we're limiting the material on the driveway to compacted gravel. Right. Unpaved, we're, right, unpaved. Good. Any other conversations?
I think we had a comment. Hugh, did you have a comment?
Come on up to the microphone if you do, please, for the record.
I think, and Heather, maybe you can address this, but the Brett Buteau has and a separate title company have looked at the parcels along the trail. The opinion, as far as I am aware of, is that almost all of the trail is owned by the county. There are a couple of parcels where there's a reversionary interest, and there are 5 or 6 parcels that have agricultural rights to cross the railway, but the ownership is still with the county. The Chernahoy parcel is one of those parcels that has agricultural rights to cross the railway. So you're not, I don't think by approving this, giving something up that isn't already there. It's just defining it more, more specifically and by use for the benefit really of both sides. So there's no question about it. Your materials show, I think it's on page 112 of your handouts, a CSM from 2002, I believe, that shows the 100-foot, or rather the 66-foot easement coming in from the town road west to the edge of the railway. That's been there for 20 plus years. At one point, I believe, Bill, a driveway permit and a culvert permit was approved for that out on the town road, but wasn't built. So I think in answer to your question, Ryan, I think on this parcel, we're pretty sure that the county owns the land underneath it, subject to the rights that were reserved to the original landowner in 1868 to cross back and forth across the railroad. So I think what this does is sort of just put some conditions on that, on gravel, on maintenance, but that right still exists. Not all most of the parcels along the trail don't have that right. I think it's limited to 5 or 6 at most. And Heather's nodding her head. So I think this is a good compromise. It benefits John, and it benefits the county by defining terms and conditions. He's not interested in shutting down the trail, but there's 2 fields on the other side that have historically been farmed, and can't do that this year because the other access point has been cut off.
Thanks, Mr. Gwynn. Okay, Ellen would like to say something.
I'd just like to point out a couple of things for your consideration or knowledge regarding this. First, yes, we have always had numerous property owners. These ones that are identified on the map we provided, Julie, if you can move to that map, it might be helpful. But most of those, not that, the one further up. Yeah, that one there. So we had, but they were always for agricultural purposes. Even when the railroad granted them, they were for agricultural purposes, not residential. By not limiting this to agricultural, you are also, if you think about it, what would a person who lives there need, or had animals there? They would need to go back and forth in the winter to take care of them, which means plowing, which means creating bumps, which might impact the snowmobilers unless it was constantly taken out. If we have winter like this winter, the snow piles up, we've got a problem. So when we talk about concerns, serious concerns about maintenance and operation and different uses, which have been on this trail since it was purchased in 1970, then there are real concerns we have with going beyond agricultural use. I would also like to point out that a few years ago, about 6 years ago, I think, there was another farmer on the trail who was going back and forth on a regular basis and with his equipment, and we did end up having a problem with the damage he constantly did to the trail, and eventually we said, you don't have it right. It wasn't one of those that had traditionally been there, and so we fenced it off. And that farmer had to accept it. He had the ability to go from one side of his property to the other from a nearby public road. It was just not as convenient. So this does raise the question, would it be limited to only those sites that already had agricultural crossings? And I would also just like to share, the full situation that occurred last year was never about taking away any of the agricultural crossings that currently existed. It was about the use of ATVs going on the body of the trail. And that can certainly be changed. We understand that. And if you do, it would open it up for anyone to ATV on the trail. But the conflict of use between ATVs and bicyclers and hikers was why previous committees and boards had agreed in the outdoor rec plan that use of the base of the trail to go north and south to help make instead of east and west was the issue. And that's the only thing that was discussed, debated, and that some warnings were provided. There's never been, other than the situation with the farmer several years ago, there's never been any enforcement action. So just wanted to make sure that you think about that winter use, year-round use compared to the summer, the seasonal, spring, summer, fall agricultural use.
Those are good things to think about. All right. Any other thoughts from the committee before we vote on this as amended, as modified with agreement? Very well. Let's put it to a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Very good. Thank you. Thank you. We're going to talk about the 5-year land and water resource management plan. And who's going to lead this? Tim Stever. Tim, thank you for your forbearance. This has been a long evening.
Yeah. I think there's some materials in here. I saw them. There we go. Whoops. Hey. Okay, you can play with it. There. So we have a land and water resource management plan in the county that we've renewed several times. And in 2018, we wrote the current one, and now we have a 5-year review plan. And one part of that process is to bring the materials to this committee to review, and then we sign off that they've reviewed those, and we send them to the state. And then later in the year, we'll meet with them for final concurrence. So this is the first step of the process. These plans are mandated, part of the statutes, and they tell us how to prepare those as well in the code. And they have, the framework is useful for us because we prepare plans in the same manner across the whole state as far as how we prepare the plans and what we consider. And once those are done and they're approved by DADCAP and reviewed by DNR, it makes us eligible for funding from the state and other locations. So it becomes a valuable tool that we can reference and some stability on what we're working on. In that plan, we set the goals, and we had 5 goals in this last plan that we set. The first four were in all the previous plans. The fifth one was an added goal this particular time. And these goals address improvement, protection of groundwater, surface water, fish and wildlife habitat, agricultural land, and soil health. And then they had some specific actions to try to work towards partnership and more active reaching out to the stewards in the county to work with them on achieving the goals 1 to 4. The first goal is groundwater focus, and that's particularly important in our county. Half of our population approximately all of the population gets its drinking water from groundwater, but half of the population gets it from private domestic wells that aren't monitored by the state. They're basically, you put a well in and you're responsible for that to be safe. So there's a lot of people that have sunk wells in our rural areas and a lot of concern about the safety of that water. If you look at the average household size, we have about 17,700 private wells that are serving the county, and they all have, of course, sanitary systems as well. And so that's a large amount of use and extraction. This groundwater also is important because it recharges our 4 main rivers, the Kinney, the Rush, the Willow, and the Apple. All are important for recreation and all have a large following of people that recreate there. The main aquifer that we use in the county is the Prairie du Chien aquifer, and that is where predominance of water extraction occurs for domestic wells. In the last 5 years, we've done a lot to address this groundwater priority. I went past one, all the good stuff. Sorry. This thing is pretty doggone touchy. Okay, I'm not touching it. We abandoned 45 wells using cost share program that we have at the Resource Management Division. We reviewed stormwater subdivisions for groundwater protection provisions, 87 of those in the last 5 years. It's a lot of growth. We've reviewed an average of 45,795 nutrient management plans, which there's a lot of provisions in there for water protection. And we generally review over 400 POUTS permits in a year, if that was not done. So 2,000 in 5 years, and that ensures that those POUTS are to standards, which is critical for when you have the number of POUTS that we have in our county. And then staff and the committee have advanced the ground and surface water study group recommendations. Some of those that we've achieved, we've established a long-term trend of 178 wells that is providing us long-term well network. We've determined the trend, it trends in groundwater nitrate, and we've looked at source and we've come up with the most probable sources causing us problems. We've determined the most vulnerable areas in our county. We've determined the nitrate exposure level for residents. And we've offered free nitrate clinics to residents, and we've done 16 of those in 5 years. And we've analyzed over 1,400 samples at those clinics. And then the last thing is important as well. We've developed and adopted, we've reviewed it here at the committee, and follow a spill and complaint response plan so that we're consistently addressing some of the common reoccurring areas of concern in the county. Just one slide of data. As far as looking at the exposure of our citizens, our long-term network shows us we have 13% of wells in the county are over the legal limit of 10 parts per million. That legal drinking limit cannot be exceeded in municipal wells. For example, if you had a well in the Village of Roberts. It's got to be under 10 parts per million to serve the residents. But out in the private sector, and you drill a well and it's over 10, you can drink that water if you so choose. There's no law against it. However, we know that there's health effects to drinking high concentrations of nitrate. So the number of wells that we've determined to be over that limit is 2,307. We have the third most highest number of wells in the state that are over 10 parts per million. So we have a lot of wells that are over 10. And that affects about 6,000 landowners. And then on down, you can see the level of exposure that we have. The one thing that's to note here is we only have 15% of the wells in our county that are actually considered untouched by man, less than 1 parts per million nitrate, which is considered background. And the reason for that is most of our wells, I mentioned earlier, are from that shallow aquifer, which is very porous. So we have to consider this when what we're going to allow on our landscape, because we have an aquifer in our county that's sensitive to contamination. So goal 2 addresses surface water. And in the last 5 years, when we entered this period in 2018, there was a goal set to reach by 2020 in the plan of 36,000 pounds of phosphorus reduction in the blue area, which is the Lake St. Croix watershed. And we had already had at that point in time 22,400 pounds of phosphorus reduced. And we did in 2018, 19, and 20 reduce 16,000 additional pounds. And so we met the goal in the TMDL implementation plan, and we are on track to meet, our TMDL goal. If the river, the lake, meets water quality standards, there is hope down the road that it will, could potentially be delisted. In the real world, there's more water bodies that are listed every year than are delisted. Very few get delisted because it's so hard to do. And obviously it would require all the counties. I think there's 12 or 13 counties that contribute to Lake St. Croix. So you can rest assured that we're doing our part, and I put that in the plan write-up that I included in your packet. Goal 3 relates to fish and wildlife habitat, very important to citizens. An example that I have in the report is that we completed 7 stream bank stabilization projects in the last 5 years, totaling 1,264 feet of stream. Another part of that goal was that every year we do this native tree and shrub distribution, and after 5 years, the last 5 years, we've sold 93,000 plants. And those go out on the landscape, buffers, little habitat areas around homes, sometimes landscaping. But they do have an impact. That's a lot of plants, and we've been doing this for a number of years. So that's one of the reasons we continue to do that particular event, is because it does address that goal in the plan. The other thing we do that's in the plan is establish riparian buffers. It's a very important step to protect habitat along streams, and we did 182 acres of riparian buffer in the last 5 years through 27 contracts. So made good progress on that. We also have a goal to preserve agricultural land, and one of the best ways to do that is through the Farm and Ranch or Farmland Preservation Program, which is a tax deferral that can be obtained in towns that meet the requirements. The hashed towns meet those requirements, and those landowners can establish a nutrient management plan, which we review and every year, and then they can get those tax deductions. Then we have a lot of land along the eastern side of the county that is not eligible to be in farmland preservation. And we could make some serious gains in those towns if those towns wanted to do that. And they have not wished to do it, and they've been approached a few times. Other parts of this goal, we've recently started to cost share cover crops a little more seriously. We've done 3,500 acres of those to protect soil quality, and we've also managed the wildlife damage program. And the reason this is important, and it's in the long-term plan that we have, is when you have agriculture and you have small landowners mixed in the landscape like we do in our county, you tend to build up a lot of deer and other animals that cause damage to agriculture. So you got to have a plan or at least a way to provide compensation to those farmers if wildlife get out of control. And we have that, and we help manage that program through a contract. Some of these things you may have seen but didn't realize why we do them. I mean, that it's probably a good program to do, but there's a reason for it, and that is to protect agriculture from the rest of us. The last goal is to help foster better partnering, and we did provide civic governance training to staff under a grant for 4 years. We do a lot of site visits because we like to meet landowners where they are and not in our office. And we feel that it is more productive that way. So a large part of our meetings that we have with landowners are at their place where they can kind of feel more comfortable. We have 5 farmer-led councils in the county that we help support through technical assistance. Our staff help design projects and survey things occasionally. We also write grants to bring in resources to do cost share in those areas. And I don't know of any other county that has 5 of these farmer-led councils. So most of them have 1 or 2, and we have 5. We started on this quite a number of years ago, and they've gotten to be more and more. We also have an active education and outreach program, and quite active and generates a lot of numbers. And the amount of money we spend on education outreach is very, very modest by comparison to the project type work that we get involved in. So it's really economical. We feel it's important to try to impact the coming generation. So a lot of those environmental contacts are kids at schools. Do a lot of presentations for them. We use a contractor, Alicia Miller, who some of you may know. We do also go to field days and tours and give those occasionally. We have kind of trained master naturalists, Alicia does, and we have an average of 15 students a year. And then she's also involved in the St. Croix Summit, which is a really interesting youth event that's done every year in River Falls. We even get involved in career fairs. And I have a staff member that likes to do those, so I make him go every time. And then plan goals that we did not make progress in. They asked those questions in the report that I put in the packet as well. There was some pretty difficult things to get done. I mean, you got to have a plan. You got to have some tough goals in there. One was that they were calling for a parcel by parcel compliance evaluation on the whole county. And and a lot of steps involved in it. And it just simply was not practical with the staff focused on the other goals that we talked about, which we felt are a higher priority. We never did get to that particular goal. Also, we have in the plan to look at some county ordinance updates to protect water quality. And our data from our well work is just now starting to come together. And we feel we may be able to make some recommendations in the coming years. We certainly did not want to proffer ordinance updates without data. We felt it had to be substantiated, and I'm glad we did that because it's quite a bit different than I thought of until we started generating the data. Developing a transfer of development rights program has not really been supported. by local communities. It's a great idea. It comes up in any kind of time you're talking to people about trying to control growth. You get into these situations. It really would be a long-term process, and it would require funding of some kind to try to purchase development rights to protect it from overdevelopment. And we have not made any progress on that. There has been some efforts to talk about it with local municipalities, and just hasn't gone anywhere so far. And also, there's a lot more additional educational strategies in the plan that just, it was quite well done. I mean, they have pages of things that we're supposed to be doing. And we're doing a lot of them, but there's no way we could get to all those educational strategies without, more manpower on it. And that's all I have. That's the Land and Water Resource Management Plan that was adopted by this committee in 2018. We made a little progress.
Seems like yesterday. In 2018, we drove down to Madison. I got to go with. It was really kind of a cool thing. So what they're asking for this time is for your permission to let me sign the document, and they're asking for the committee's permission to do that.
So we'd like a motion to that effect.
I make a motion that we allow the chairman to sign the document.
I'll second.
It's been moved and seconded. I will abstain because I'm the chairman. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And I abstain, so passes.
Any
Thank you.
questions on the materials?
I have one question for you, and that is, you talked about a riparian buffer.
Yes.
So what do you plant in a riparian buffer?
Generally put in perennial prairie species.
Okay. Like grasses or flowers or?
It's usually mostly
grasses.
grasses, although they like to have a mix in there to provide orbs.
Oh.
Yeah.
Just wondering. That word riparian isn't used every day, and I just wondered what you did to make that there. So.
I see. Okay.
You did an excellent job, Tim. Thanks. The only reason I stayed was for this next thing.
Thank you, Chair. I think some of the other members must have been pulling my leg or something, because the large crowd we had, they said they were here for the financial report, but the meeting went on so long, they must have gotten tired and had to leave.
It's the only way we could keep you here, Ken, this long.
No, they're all still out in the hall. Adam, could you call them back in?
Just a couple of things to point out. As I pointed out to the administration committee, one of the things I can tell when I review our financial statements is economic indicators. So one of those economic indicators is within the Register of Deeds. If you look at this second line right here, prior year April, we'd collected $357,000 in Register of Deeds fees. This year, through the same time period, we're at $252,000. So we're $100,000 short. We'll likely fall under budget on our Register of Deeds fees for the year, and that's just a slowdown in the housing market. As interest rates ran up, that economic indicator is affecting our budget. When we look at parks, though, so parks fees and rents, so right in the middle of the revenue section there, year-to-date last year we were at $61,000, this year at $60,000, so we're pretty close to where we were last year. So at least the economic conditions are not affecting park goers to the same degree yet. Other than that, all the other expenses and stuff were on track. If you had any questions, there were 15 of them, I'd be happy to answer them.
Ellen?
I would just like to point out for Ken, maybe he missed this, but if you look at the zoning budget, last year at this time, our revenues for zoning permits was only at $69,000. It's at $114,000. We are seeing in our department a heavy uptick in actual economic development activity in terms of development. So we might see an uptick later in the year at Registered Deeds too, as it slowly trickles down.
Sure.
And I would also attribute, we are seeing higher than normal sales of our annual passes due to our online and our QR codes at each of our parks. They're actually up by about 35–40%.
And we'll all remember, somebody stole those pay boxes last year and we lost, so this is a great thing. So,
Someone tried to steal the QR code.
well, steal the QR code all you want. Right. It's not the identity you want.
Is it stamped like those TJ Maxx labels when you try to rip them off or rips apart? When you...
No.
All right, anything else? Any questions for Ken?
I'll be performing all week, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Remember to tip your waiter. All right, announcements and correspondence?
I have a few. We have the spring appliance and electronics event coming up. I'm just going to pass these down, take however many you want. Saturday, May 20th, and that's this Saturday. So if you have any appliances, electronics, that kind of thing, there are 3 locations in the county: Hudson Public Works site on Cratley Lane, Hammond Recycling Center on County Road E, and the Glenwood City Recycling Center on Oak Street in Glenwood City. So that's one thing. Another is coming up not that far away, about 2 weeks away, is a reminder of our grand opening of our new campground, Vista Prairie, our group camp on June 3rd from 10 to 4 on that Saturday. And that weekend, June 3rd and 4th, will be our free entry weekend for us and for the state park. So we encourage you to attend and come on out. Love to see a whole bunch of county board members there. Also, our free well and water nitrate screening clinics. This is the chart of all of them, but the next one that's coming up is Wednesday, June 14th at the Ag Service Center in Baldwin. Also coming up later this summer, we're having 2 events, St. Croix River Workshops on the water. I think I forgot to mention this one last time. So here's a handout, just take one from the top, they're all the same. It's $30 per person, dinner and cash bar, and it will be in 2 different locations. Taylor's Falls on the Upper River on June 27th from 5 to 9 p.m. and on July 25th from 5 to 9 p.m., leaving out of Stillwater on the Lower St. Croix. The county has, our county department has, if any of you want to attend, you can't bring a spouse, but we would pay for you to attend because this will have educational events on both trips about protecting our St. Croix River, and so it is an educational event for our leaders, and it's specifically for our local leaders, so we would pay for your attendance. So I want to encourage you to consider going, okay? And then if you do want to go, just contact us in our office, we'll get you signed up. But I know sometimes people want to bring a spouse, and they usually don't get to do that, so sorry, unless you pay for that one on your own. And then we only have one other thing to bring up when you get to date of next meeting.
Requests for future agenda items. I'll call mine in later. I don't have anything yet. All right. It's okay. What are we talking about? Dates of next meeting? What do you have?
So every year this comes up. The county board canceled the July county board meeting, and we have traditionally the county picnic is during the county fair, which is a Thursday usually, and that picnic is Thursday, the committee meeting is the same Thursday, and the county fair is the same Thursday. So every year we have this come up, and we thought we would try to do this further ahead of time. We also have a couple of property owners who are doing to do rezonings. If it would probably be better to help them try to get on the very next county board agenda, which would be August. And so if we can make sure that our county committee meeting is held perhaps at a timely way, that we can make sure that that gets on the August agenda, that would be appreciated. So we're asking about moving that meeting. We've moved it last few years, and we thought we'd start a little earlier so we can get the public hearing notices. Otherwise, it comes up in June, and then we can't do some of the things we want to do, so.
So what date are we looking at?
I don't remember if we had time to check, but Julie could probably check right now. County boardroom availability
Should we
is
just
an
send out
element.
a survey thing, see what people want, or can we decide now? Anybody want to? venture into it?
One suggestion was possibly July 13th or the week before our regular meeting, which would be July 22nd instead, maybe the July 15th, but there might be other county committee meetings on that day. Oh, excuse me, I said the wrong dates. I was looking at you.
13th?
I'm sorry. It's the 20th, moving that up to Thursday, the 13th. That's what we were thinking. Or perhaps, we always tend to have it on a Thursday because of the public hearing notices. So,
July
would that
13th?
work?
July 13th looks,
I'd go for the 20th.
The 20th is the regular meeting, and we would be skipping the,
And
You
just
don't
a
be there?
reminder that July 13th is the tentative date that has been set for the CLUE training that evening in
Oh.
Amory,
shoot,
which y'all might want to attend as well.
yes. So the Center for Land Use Education has an opportunity for, it's going to be in, I forget. Do you remember where?
Monday, the 24th.
In Amory. I knew it was Polk County. Anyway, there will be a land use education training in Polk County, sponsored by Polk County, but open to adjoining counties. It's very good training for plan commissions, Board of Adjustments, and we always encourage, and again, we would pay for your attendance if you would go. That is in the evening, though. So, but I don't know, anyone else have conflicts on the 13th? Would we have a quorum or not?
Jerry, can you make the 12th? Why wouldn't we do it on a Wednesday?
No, I won't be able to make that week. I'll be on a motorcycle someplace. More interesting.
Ride carefully.
Yeah. So that week, Monday, the 17th would be open.
That would be fine, I believe. Depends on staff's calendars. I'll have to take a look.
Monday, the 17th?
And also that would work because
The
the
board
reason
room-
we don't want to go earlier in that week on the 10th is because the publication dates.
Yeah.
We need to have it the 6th and the 13th published, and then, or we have to do it in June and then in the first week of July. So it has to be a full week. Does it have to be a full week before, right? So that means we'd have to publish still in June, June 29th and June 6th, or
Which
July 6th.
we should have the information, so that shouldn't be an issue.
Right.
Let's just say tentatively on the 17th, and if there's a conflict, let us know, we'll rethink that.
Okay,
So
thank
for-
you very much.
So for right now, the next meeting is May 23rd, work session, and the next regular meeting is Thursday, June 15. Having said that, I will adjourn this meeting. Thank you all very much for your forbearance. Excellent job. Good night.